native, has the CCW.
Is he in the floor? Oh, shoot. You said you see blood? Go run back. Get EMS out here. Oh boy. There's a lot of blood.
In the quiet, tree-lined town of Hudson, Ohio, where neighbors greet each other on morning walks and colonial homes sit in serene order, Todd Morgan, a 41-year-old professor and father, was never late. Never. But on April 19th, 2023, the reliable rhythm of his parental devotion skipped a beat, setting into motion an investigation that would unearth a world far removed from faculty meetings and playground visits. Todd's life at first glance was the picture of success. A business and finance professor at the prestigious Cleveland State University, he held multiple degrees and had returned to his alma mater to inspire the next generation. Known for his intellectual charm and deep love for his two children, Todd was respected in academia and adored by his family.
I was wondering if I'd be able to request a wellness check on someone.
Okay, what's going on?
So my daughter was supposed to be picked up by her father today. And I got a call from the school that she was still at the school, so I ended up picking her up. They tried to contact him. I tried to call him a couple times and haven't received anything back.
And what's his name?
Todd Morgan.
Yet as police officers stepped into his silent home that evening, the image began to fracture.
God.
2015 Porsche, black in color to Todd Morgan from that address. Pella native, has the CCW.
Is he in the floor? Oh, shoot. You said you see blood?
Much like the broken back door through which they entered. They found him lying there, alone, unmoving, dressed in a robe, blood pooled around his head.
Oh boy. There's a lot of blood. Party looks to be... I might have fell. Crap. Oh, it's open. Oh, wow.
Nearby, shell casings glistened like sinister breadcrumbs, but no weapon could be found. Something was off.
Hey, Sarge, you wanna... Are we... Say, it's pretty bad in there.
Okay, so
Yeah, there's shell casings in the house all over, but
okay.
there's no weapon.
The chaos in the master bedroom, the condom wrappers, the open bottles, none of it made sense in the context of a loving father's life. And then came the piggy bank in a child's room, overturned as if someone had been looking for something, or staging a scene.
You found money?
Change. Piggy bank knocked over.
It would take hours and then days for the picture to come into sharper focus. And what emerged was a web of secrets and shadows, of love turned transactional, of two lives intersecting through a dating app and ending in bloodshed. The tipping point came quietly. A 911 call made at 7:21 a.m. from Todd's phone. No one spoke, but the call was real, and it placed someone at the scene moments after the fatal shots rang out. An accident? Maybe.
You heard
The two shots, I'm assuming, I don't know, and then I thought someone was banging on something, and then a little pause, and then four more.
As detectives peeled back the layers of Todd's private life, they discovered a trail that led not to a bitter ex-wife or vengeful colleague, but to a woman named Terriana Pacelli. Young, mysterious, with a history. Her name surfaced again and again, in Todd's phone records, on Cash App transactions, even in her own online searches. Who was she? A companion? A professional visitor? A jilted partner? She claimed not to know him, had never been to Hudson.
You ever been to Hudson before?
I don't recall.
Okay. What about around
I go
neighborhood?
to a lot of places.
Okay. But you can't recall being in Hudson?
No.
Okay.
Had no idea why her phone dialed 911.
So, your phone, why would it dial called 911 on April 19th. In the morning of April 19th, around 7:22 in the morning.
My phone?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know why my phone would call. I didn't call nobody.
You didn't call 911?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Or why her DNA was on items in his home.
Your DNA is inside of that house. Black and Miles are inside of that house.
But surveillance footage said otherwise.
I don't know how to work this thing. But that,
Okay, so that's the car.
yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to see anything for that or whatever.
Okay. I'll give this back to you. I'll go tell.
Okay, I'm not sure how to.
Yeah.
So did the digital footprints, the Facebook photos, the change of phone number days after the murder. There was no blood on her hands, just data. And that was enough.
We've got a lot of information. We have DNA evidence, we have video, we have phone calls, we have Bumble chat messages. Okay, we have shell casings, we have shoe prints. We've got a lot of stuff that is.
But what truly haunts isn't just the methodical buildup of evidence or the tragedy of a life cut short. It's the silence of that little girl, still waiting at school, staring down the driveway long after everyone else had gone home. What did she feel at that moment? Confusion? Abandonment? Or did some part of her impossibly understand that something terrible had happened? The community that once saw Todd Morgan as a pillar would now remember him as the center of a chilling true crime story. And behind the courtroom statements and forensic facts lies the aching question that this documentary tries to unravel. How well do we ever really know the people we love and those they invite into their lives? Stay with us as we piece together the truth, one chilling clue at a time. Hudson, Ohio, a community carved out of serene ambition and suburban pride. Where families buy oversized homes with wraparound porches and oversized dreams, crime here doesn't happen, or at least it's not supposed to. So when Dr. Todd Morgan, a well-known professor and father of two, failed to collect his daughter from school one Wednesday afternoon in April 2023, it wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. Todd was many things to many people. At Cleveland State University, he was Dr. Morgan, the finance professor with a sharp mind and a growing reputation. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday without fail, he picked up his nearly 5-year-old daughter from school, rain or shine. But that day, the minutes stretched into hours, and the school receptionist eventually picked up the phone. She dialed Mary, Todd's ex-girlfriend and mother of his daughter. The girl was still waiting. Mary didn't panic, at first. Maybe Todd got stuck in a meeting. Maybe he forgot, unlikely as that was. She drove to the school herself, picked up their daughter, and tried calling Todd. No answer. His phone rang but went to voicemail. A wellness check was the natural next step. Hudson police responded promptly. Officers Peggy and Bowen were dispatched to Todd's home on West Streetsboro Street, a large, comfortable house he had purchased not long after his return to Ohio. From the outside, nothing seemed amiss. The porch light flicked on. His luxury SUV sat silently in the driveway. But the long gravel driveway gave way to something officers felt but didn't speak of. A quiet too quiet, the kind that wraps around a scene of unspeakable things. As they made their way around back, they spotted it. Blood. And then, through the glass door, the silhouette of a man, lying on the floor, motionless.
Oh boy. There's a lot of blood. Party looks to be, might have fell. Crap. Oh, it's open. Oh wow.
Inside, the sight was grim. Todd's lifeless body lay near the back entrance, dressed in only a bathrobe, his head resting in a pool of dried blood. Nearby were shell casings, one here, another there, but no gun. Was it under him? Did he fall on it?
It's a bullet casing here, which that's weird. Why is there a bullet casing here?
Had he taken his own life? At first glance, the wound near his temple hinted at, But the lack of a weapon and the positioning of the casings began to whisper a darker truth.
I don't see a weapon. That's why I'm thinking something else. A weapon of any kind. That's weird. Why is there... This makes me think someone shot him. We're gonna have to call the detectives out. Hey, Sarge, you wanna... Are we... Say, it's pretty bad in there.
Okay, so
Yeah, there's shell casings in the house all over, but
Okay.
no weapon.
Keep the.
Okay. He's been sitting there for a while. That blood's dried up.
Okay.
I don't. Can you tell me what?
What's that?
It looks weird.
The house told its own story, one detail at a time. In the master bedroom, open condom wrappers and bottles of alcohol painted a picture far removed from the scholarly, fatherly image Todd projected. In a child's bedroom, a piggy bank was overturned.
You found money?
Change. Piggy bank knocked over.
But nothing else disturbed. Odd for a break-in. Nothing was missing.
Well, if it was a robbery, the house would be more ransacked, right? Guess that one you're in now?
His laptops, tablets, even his Porsche, untouched. No forced entry at the front, but the back door appeared broken, or forced, or staged. The deeper investigators dug, the more Todd's double life emerged.
The back door looks like it was kicked from the inside. I have not gone inside the house. So he's laying on his back with a gunshot wound to the head at the back door, and it looks like the door was forced out, as in out to the door. So I'd like for somebody to come out and take a look. There's shell casings all over the place, and just to figure out exactly what's going on.
He wasn't just the doting father and learned professor. He had secrets, custody battles, a past marred by infidelity, a struggle with alcohol monitored through an interlock device in his car. He was fighting to hold it all together, even as parts of his personal life spiraled into chaos.
So he's required to do an iSober device.
What's that?
It's to, he'll breathe into it and it reads whether he's had a drink or not.
For the vehicle?
Just any...
Oh, wow, anything at all, okay.
And the last report I got was from yesterday at 7 o'clock in the morning.
You get reports from
Yeah,
the
it
ISO?
emails
No
the
kidding.
results.
So you got a result for that test yesterday?
Yes, I can pull it up.
Does it give numbers or just say if it's positive or negative for alcohol?
It does give numbers.
Okay.
What's this test called again?
iSober device.
But even these red flags weren't enough to connect the dots, until a whisper from technology turned into a scream. A 911 call made from Todd's phone logged at exactly 7:21 a.m. that morning. No words were spoken, just the call. Investigators knew it had to mean something. Had Todd tried to call for help? Or had the killer accidentally triggered the emergency alert in a panic? That one detail cracked the case open, and then came the name, Terriana Pichelle. She had never been seen in Hudson, never publicly linked to Todd, but the evidence was already stacking against her. Digital, forensic, financial. Todd's cell phone traveled with hers in the aftermath. A $50 cash app transfer from Todd to Terriana hours before his death. Surveillance footage of a silver car parked by his Porsche, gone by 7:30 a.m. The timing, the movements, the phone data, it all lined up too perfectly. And yet Hudson wasn't ready. The town, the family, even Todd's own children, none could have imagined what lay beneath the surface of a seemingly normal day. A beloved professor was dead, a mysterious woman was on the run, and somewhere inside all that silence, someone was trying to cover their tracks. The truth was clawing its way out.
Then I saw somebody come out of the house to the car that was next to the Porsche. They were in the car. I mean, it was there.
The Porsche?
No, it was next to the Porsche.
Okay.
And it was there when I woke up this morning at 5 o'clock. You know, as I walked.
The car was already there.
The car was already there. The person was due. Yeah, when I woke up.
Okay.
But at 7:15, 7:20, I heard. And then I saw someone come out of the house, go to the car, opened up the car, was there for a while, and then took something back into the house, like a package or a box, it looked like.
Okay.
And then came back out, not running, but walking fast.
Quick paced?
Yeah.
And what it revealed would shake the core of this quiet town forever. The crime, when laid bare, was brutal, not only in its execution, but in its cold calculation. Dr. Todd Morgan wasn't just killed, he was hunted inside his own home, ambushed in a space where he should have felt safest. The nature of the wounds, 7 gunshots, 2 of them instantly fatal, spoke of rage or intent. This wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. The first officers on the scene could barely comprehend what they were stepping into. Blood had dried in thick, crusted streaks near the base of the back door. The house, oddly enough, wasn't ransacked. That was the first sign that this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Flat-screen TVs remained fixed to the wall. Laptops and tablets were untouched on the kitchen counter. Even Todd's Porsche SUV, keys in the hallway, hadn't been touched. But what chilled the responding officers was the silence. No struggle, no witness. Just Todd, sprawled out, eyes open to the ceiling, a dressing gown curled slightly at his side, and bullet casings, metal echoes of whatever madness had erupted that morning. Inside the home, subtle chaos ruled. Upstairs in the master bedroom, the bed looked slept in, sheets crumpled at the edges, pillows askew. A collection of open condom wrappers littered the floor beside a bottle of tequila in a half-finished glass. A drawer hung open awkwardly, revealing lingerie and a gun holster. Yet no weapon in sight. Police scoured every inch, even prying into the closets and attic access, but the murder weapon had vanished. In the children's rooms, everything appeared untouched, except for one detail. In the corner of his daughter's room, her pink ceramic piggy bank had been knocked over. Coins and crumpled bills scattered like forgotten confetti. Not stolen, just disturbed.
Change. Piggy bank knocked over.
Well, if it was a robbery, the house would be more ransacked, right?
Okay,
Just that one you're in now?
It was as if someone had deliberately overturned it, perhaps looking for something, or maybe just creating a distraction. At the foot of the staircase, another bullet casing was found. That's when detectives began to piece it together. Whoever fired those shots had moved through the house. This wasn't a stationary execution, it was a pursuit. The killer had followed Todd, room to room, stalking him, waiting for the final shot. Most of the bullets struck his upper body, one embedded in his clavicle, another fired from extremely close range. So close the skin around the entry point showed stippling from the muzzle blast. Whoever pulled the trigger stood face to face with him. The back door told its own story. The frame had been splintered from the inside. A portion of the lock had blown out and landed several feet away on the deck outside. Blood spatter trailed from inside the doorway and down the steps to the driveway. Footprints, thick, heavy boot prints, tracked through it all. Officers checked the boots of every first responder. None matched.
Let me double check Sean's tread.
Unless when Sean walked back out, he did, but we both went over the water.
All right. Lee, just for good measure, bottom of your feet. All right, definitely. Can I see your tread on your shoes? Yeah, definitely not you. Okay. There's footprints all over in the blood, and it looks like boots. So.
I don't think it's Cassie's there because her tread's.
Yeah, nobody. It matches nobody's.
Can I see the bottom of your boot real quick, just to see? No. Yeah. Can I see the bottom of your shoe? Please.
I try to tippy-toe around.
We just have this.
The prints belonged to someone else. This was no suicide, no accident. This was murder. And then came the 911 call, the phantom ring from Todd's own phone, just minutes after witnesses reported hearing gunfire.
It had to be 7. one.
At 7:20.
Yeah, that it all happened within a couple
That
of
was
minutes.
you heard
the two shots. I'm assuming. I don't know. And then I thought someone was banging on something, and then a little pause, and then four more.
At 7:21 a.m., dispatch received a call from his number. No one spoke. No sounds, just dead air. But it was real, and it was damning. Police now believe the killer may have unintentionally triggered the iPhone's emergency SOS feature, 5 rapid presses of the power button, and in doing so, left a trail. Back at HQ, detectives turned to Todd's digital life, his texts, his emails, his dating apps. That's when they found her, Terriana Pella, a slim, soft-featured woman with long black hair and a social media presence that didn't match the life she claimed to lead. Terriana had met Todd on Bumble. At first, the messages seemed flirtatious, but quickly the tone shifted. Screenshots revealed negotiations, payment terms, and service windows. She wasn't just on a date, she was transactional, and she was scheduled to be there that morning. Cash App confirmed it. Todd had sent her $50 at 6:58 a.m. A second, much larger payment, $1,000, was attempted 23 minutes later, but it required facial verification. A notification pinged on his lock screen. He never authenticated it. At the same time, Ring doorbell footage from a neighbor captured a silver crossover-style vehicle pulling into Todd's driveway at approximately 6:45 a.m. It left by 7:30.
I don't know how to work this thing. But
okay, so that's the car.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to see anything for that or whatever.
Okay. I'll give this back to you. I'll go tell.
Okay, I'm not sure how to.
Yeah.
And then it jumps to 7:30 and it's gone.
And it's gone.
Yeah.
So what time is that? Right.
6:50.
50.
Yeah.
Okay, and then 7. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, the next spot on here is 7:30, so there was a gap.
Okay.
And then it's gone at 7:30.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay.
In that brief window, the murder happened. A light-colored vehicle, a shadowy figure, long hair, a fast walk, a box in hand.
So then I saw somebody come out of the house with long hair to the shoulders. I couldn't even tell you if it was male or female, to be honest with you. It looked like a smaller frame, not a big person. Got into a little car. I wouldn't say the car was champagne color. He said it was bluish. So there you go for our perspective of what it was. There are cars. Todd, from what I know, he's only been here less than a year. He has 2 children from different mothers. They're coming and going all the time, dropping kids off.
Oh, sure.
And there's always like a Jeep there from somebody he knows. And I don't know if it's one of the mothers or not, but it's a newer Jeep. Okay. This was a car that I'd never seen.
You've never seen that car?
No. And that person came out, like Gene said, grabbed something from the car. I thought it was more like a package. He thought it was like a box. Again, we weren't putting anything in perspective. It's just what we walked as passing by. And then the person took something back into the house and then came back out and then just drove away.
The physical evidence inside the home was equally damning. A black and mild cigar on the kitchen counter tested positive for Terriana's DNA. So did the open condoms in the master bedroom. One of the shell casings was linked to a previous unsolved homicide in Cleveland. The murder weapon, still missing, matched a gun once associated with her. What began as a wellness check had now become a manhunt. Terriana wasn't just a name in Todd's contact list. She was now the prime suspect in his execution-style murder. And though she would claim ignorance and deny knowing him, every step she took that morning had already been recorded by satellites, by cash apps, by doorbell cameras. She thought she had slipped away, but technology never forgets. The investigation into Todd Morgan's murder took shape with an urgency that only comes when the evidence refuses to sit still. Every hour brought a new lead, and each one pointed in the same direction, toward a woman who claimed she'd never even heard of the victim. But the digital trail she left behind told a very different story. Detectives zeroed in on Terriana Pella. Her name surfaced not only through cash app transactions, but through IP addresses linked to Todd's Wi-Fi network and through metadata from search queries on her phone. A search warrant revealed that in the weeks leading up to the murder, Terriana had visited multiple articles about Todd's career and home. And on the morning of April 19th, the same day Todd was killed, she searched, "Can police track your phone if you take the SIM card out?" She tried to stay invisible, but each move she made illuminated the path to her doorstep. Tracking her down, however, proved challenging. Her phone pinged last near the intersection of Interstate 271 in Macedonia, moving at over 60 miles per hour, exactly 6 minutes after Todd's phone registered the 911 call. The two devices traveled the same route, a chilling confirmation that the killer didn't just take his life. They took his phone with them. When officers arrived at the listed address in Akron, a man answered, older, calm, and immediately dismissive. "She doesn't live here," he said. "You think I'd let some girl stay here with my grandkids upstairs?" But his answers raised more questions than they silenced.
How are we doing? What was she in trouble? Well, we need to talk to her. Oh, okay. I definitely let her know. You tell her to call the Hudson Police Department? Hudson Police Department, Hudson, Ohio. Okay, I sure will.
What friend she's staying with?
I don't know, man. It's some friend. I mean, she's a friend. You know, look like a little girlfriend. You know, she's a young girl. I'm an older man, and you know, I'm just getting my grandkids upstairs in the bed. Y'all think y'all gonna just walk through my dog house? Hell no. Ain't no Terriana in here.
Apparently he's mad.
What's that?
She's with one of her girlfriends in Garden Valley.
Getting nailed to your house.
Yeah, how far is that from here?
That's not far.
Oh, we could follow you over there.
He refused to let them search the home, said she was staying with a friend, wouldn't say where. The detectives left with nothing except suspicion. Still, they pushed forward. Phone data, pulled from cell towers and GPS logs, led them to an apartment complex in Valley. There, parked in plain sight, was a silver Ford Taurus X, matching the description given by neighbors and seen in ring footage near Todd's home. The back plate was missing. Inside, police found receipts, trace evidence, and, more damningly, signs of an attempted escape plan. Someone had packed in a hurry. When Terriana was finally taken into custody, she remained stone-faced. She denied everything. "Todd Morgan? Doesn't ring a bell," she said. "Hudson? Never been."
Okay. You ever been to Hudson before?
Probably so. I don't recall.
Okay. What about around
I go to a lot of places.
Okay. But you can't recall being in Hudson?
No.
Okay. So your phone, why would it dial 911 on April 19th? In the morning, at April 19th, around 7:22 in the morning.
My phone?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know why my phone would call. I didn't call nobody.
You didn't call 911?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I don't know. Did they say I called? I didn't call.
Yeah, we get your phone number. And we attempted to call back that morning. We could get an answer.
But the investigators were ready. They laid the evidence on the table, piece by piece. They showed her the GPS data placing her phone at Todd's address from midnight until after 7 a.m. on April 19th.
So here's what's interesting about these two photos. Right? Okay, these two photos were actually on your phone.
On my phone?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they weren't on my phone.
You actually typed in a search for this guy, and you viewed this image on your phone. You also did a search for 320 West Streetsville Street, and you viewed this image on your phone. We're giving you an opportunity here to talk to us. We need to know what happened.
Okay, and I'm telling you, I don't know what's going on. What do you have? I don't know what's going on.
Who's that?
They showed the Ring doorbell video of a light-colored car pulling away. They presented images of the shoe prints found in blood, traced back to a pair of Nike sneakers she had worn in a Facebook photo posted just 2 months earlier. Then came the DNA matches.
We've got a lot of information. We have DNA evidence, we have video, we have phone calls, we have Bumble chat messages, Okay, we have shell casings, we have shoe prints. We've got a lot of stuff that is a lot of good evidence here. Okay, this is your opportunity to talk to us about it. What's that?
I really don't know what you want me to say.
I want to know what happened. We want to know what happened. We have a lot of questions. We want to know what happened.
The black and mild cigar, the condom wrappers. Both placed her inside the home, inside Todd's private, intimate space. And then came the clincher. Cash app logs showing not one, but two payments. The first for $50, the second an attempted transfer for $1,000 interrupted when Todd failed to verify it. Just minutes later, he was dead. The implication was staggering. Was this a transaction gone wrong? A robbery turned murder?
So, Todd Morgan sent you $50 in the morning of April 19th.
I don't know.
Okay, but he did. So, what I want to ask you is, there was another payment. About 23 minutes later, there was a $1,000 payment that was sent from Todd Morgan to Black Beauty. And you confirm that Black Beauty, this Cash App is you. That's you, obviously, in that picture. So he sent you $1,000. Now, we go back to a $50 payment. You say, guys send you random $50 every now and then. Okay, you guys send you random $1,000 payments?
No.
Okay, so
but it can happen. So
it could happen.
Yeah, it could happen.
Or had she come with the intent to kill all along? But even as the evidence mounted, Terriana refused to break. She questioned the legitimacy of every log, denied her own messages, and shrugged off the photos of her car, her searches, her fingerprints. Could have been anyone, she said. That's not proof.
Okay, so the morning of April 19th, here's what we have. We have this Cash App payment, right? I went through for $50. We have another Cash App payment that was 23 minutes later for $1,000. We had this vehicle leaving Todd Morgan's house at around 7:23 in the morning on April 19th. You said that's your car. Have your phone at 320 West Streetsboro Street on April 19th at 7 in the morning. You actually have your phone at that address after midnight on April 19th, which looks like it was there overnight. It's not possible. Your DNA is inside of that house. Black and Milds are inside of that house. Chiron shipments that are inside of the house that match shoes that you're wearing in Facebook photos.
What she didn't know, or pretended not to, was that investigators had also connected her to an earlier unsolved homicide in Cleveland. In 2012, a man was shot in his apartment. The bullet casings left behind? A perfect ballistic match to the ones found in Todd Morgan's kitchen. At the time, Terriana had blamed an ex-boyfriend, but now her name was in the center of two murders, not just one. Back in Hudson, as news broke of the arrest, the community stood stunned. Todd's family, already shattered, now faced a new kind of anguish. Not just grief, but betrayal. He had trusted her, let her into his home, paid her, and for that, he had been executed. Still, no confession came. Not then, not ever. Terriana remained silent, cool, unreadable, until the day of her trial. And then, as the courtroom filled with family members, friends, and cameras, she made her first and only admission. She was guilty. The courtroom was silent. Not the respectful quiet of legal decorum, but the heavy stillness of grief, of tension, of finality. On one side, the family of Dr. Todd Morgan sat in a row, eyes hollow from months of agony. On the other, Terriana Pacelli, no longer the woman in online photos with a sly smile and confident posture, but a defendant in shackles, her face unreadable, her gaze fixed ahead. It had been nearly a year since Todd's murder, but for his loved ones, the timeline stood still. Every morning still began with the same thought. He should be here. The plea deal had arrived just days before the trial was set to begin. 20 years to life for murder, an additional 3 for the firearm charge. 23 years minimum. It was a compromise that offered certainty and spared the family the torment of watching the evidence unfold all over again in front of a jury. The prosecutor detailed the state's case one last time for the record. The emergency 911 call from Todd's phone, the forensic match to shell casings from another murder, the DNA on the cigar, the $50 and failed $1,000 payments, the phone GPS trail, the attempt to wipe her presence by changing numbers and devices, all of it layered into a timeline too precise to ignore. The murder was not spontaneous, he said. It was targeted, timed, and cold. Then came the impact statements. Mary, Todd's former partner and the mother of his daughter, stood at the podium. Her voice trembled but held firm.
Todd was also a loving father. Since his murder, my daughter's life has been irrevocably altered. At just 6 years old, she is at one of the most impressionable stages of her life. She was only 4 when she waited at school for her dad to pick her up, not understanding why he never came. When I arrived, she was confused and desperately wanted to call him, but each call went unanswered. I had to explain to her that her daddy wouldn't be coming back because someone had hurt him. I watched her curl up in my arms, hiding her face as she processed this unimaginable loss.
My daughter is 6. She still asks if her daddy can come back, she began. She was 4 years old when she waited outside her school, wondering why he hadn't come. He never missed a pickup. That day I had to tell her he never would again. She paused, her throat tightening. And how do you explain that to a child? That her father's life was taken by a stranger? For what? A few $100s? A moment of anger? Then Todd's mother, Sandy, spoke. She clutched a printed photo of Todd as a boy and held it up for the court to see. This is my son. Before the degrees, before the job, before any of the mistakes, he was just my little boy. He told me just weeks before he died that he was broken. But he was trying. He was meditating. He was exercising. He was trying to live better, be better. Her voice cracked. And just when I thought he was coming back to himself, just when I thought he'd made it out of the darkness, he was taken, brutally, meaninglessly, by someone who didn't even know him. The courtroom listened, unmoving.
I'm Todd's mom. I always will be. Todd's not here to tell his story. Only God, Todd, and you know the truth of what happened on April 19. All I know, he was brutally murdered by you, and he basically died for nothing. You didn't even know him. Your actions to take my son's life changed my life forever. It's changed all of our lives. Even more so, you took a father from 2 beautiful children. They were his world, and he was theirs.
Even the judge's face was heavy with sorrow. Finally, Tariana was given the chance to speak. She rose slowly, her hands cuffed, voice low and soft.
To his family, I'm very sorry, and I hope that one day that you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. That's it.
I'm sorry, she said, barely audible. To the family, I hope someday you can forgive me. Then she sat back down. That was all. No explanation, no motive, no answers. The judge delivered the sentence with a steady voice, reiterating the plea agreement. 20 years to life for aggravated murder. 3 additional years for the use of a firearm. Served consecutively. Parole eligibility after 23 years. There is no guarantee of release, he clarified. Only the possibility should the parole board deem it just.
And not provide any unnecessary burden on state or local resources. A period of incarceration is certainly necessary due to the nature of the offense and the loss that's suffered by all of the victims in this matter. I'm sentencing you to a period of 20 years to life on count 1, aggravated murder and unclassified felony. In addition, that sentence will run consecutive to the 3-year firearm specification, which is attached to that count 1. That firearm specification 3-year sentence must be served first, it must be consecutive, and it is in fact mandatory. This will make you eligible for parole, which there's no guarantee of that, at the earliest at 23 years, but you could serve up to life in prison for this matter. Do you understand all of that, Ms. Paschal?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Then looking directly at Terriana, he added, "You took a father from his children, a son from his mother, a man who was working to be better. Your actions didn't just end a life, they shattered many." As the gavel fell, the courtroom didn't erupt. There was no applause, no relief, just a soft exhale from Mary as she reached down and hugged her daughter, who sat quiet beside her, holding a photo of her dad. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions, but the family said nothing. For them, the story wasn't over. Not really. It would live in the quiet spaces of their days, in birthdays missed and graduations unshared, in empty chairs, in bedtime stories left unfinished. Inside the prison van, Terriana was led away. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Justice had been done. But peace, that would take far longer to arrive. The story of Dr. Todd Morgan is not just a tale of murder. It is a haunting reminder of how thin the veil can be between order and chaos, between safety and vulnerability. It shows us how quickly lives can be shattered, not only by a bullet, but by a decision, a stranger, a secret. He was a father, a teacher, a man trying to get better. He struggled, yes. He made mistakes, but he was present. He showed up for his children. He held down his job. He was climbing out of the fog when the shadows reached back and pulled him under. For Todd's family, the tragedy doesn't end with the sentencing. Grief isn't bound by court dates or legal outcomes. It stretches on. In the morning school runs now done alone, in the empty side of the bed, in the phone calls never made again. His daughter, only 4 when she waited at school for the father who would never come, will grow up with more questions than answers. The questions remain. Was it premeditated? Was it revenge, robbery, or something else entirely? We may never know. Terriana Paschal never explained, never confessed beyond a quiet, "I'm sorry." Her silence leaves a void that no evidence can fill. But this case also speaks to the quiet triumph of investigative work. A single accidental 911 call became the thread that unraveled everything. Technology, phones, GPS, digital payments, even social media, did what human memory and denial could not. It told the truth. Through methodical police work and unrelenting digital forensics, a suspect who tried to vanish in plain sight was brought to justice. The shell casings, the footprints, the metadata, each one a breadcrumb. Together, they led to conviction. The quiet neighborhood of Hudson, Ohio, will never be the same. Neighbors who once waved from porches now lock their doors tighter. The town carries the stain of the unimaginable. But they also remember Todd, the real Todd, the professor with a warm smile, the dad who danced in the living room with his kids, the man who was trying. This documentary has traced his final hours, not to glorify the darkness, but to honor the light he left behind, and to remind all of us, even in small towns and quiet homes, darkness can knock. Often it already knows the way in. Before we close, we want to thank you for walking this journey with us. True crime isn't just about what happened. It's about why it happened and what we can learn from it. If this story moved you, if it left you thinking, share it. Talk about it. Remember the name Todd Morgan. And if you want to see more stories that dig deep, that tell the truth without compromise, help us keep going.
You know, 4 that you're sleeping with, she messed with the wrong mama.
Yes, it's in the shower. My teeth. I just snapped and I grabbed the knife and I just stabbed her.
It was a quiet Monday evening in the small, tight-knit town of Pella, Iowa. The sun had dipped low in the May sky, casting golden shadows over the modest homes that lined Glenwood Street. For most residents, May 18th, 2020, was just another day fading into the uncertain haze of a pandemic-stricken spring. But for one woman, it was the end. At exactly 8:30 p.m., a 911 call jolted local dispatchers into action. The voice on the line trembled. A woman had stepped outside her apartment to catch some air, and instead caught sight of something that didn't belong in her peaceful neighborhood. A maroon truck, a woman staggering away, her face drenched in blood, and then silence.
Police department. Yeah, I live over. There's what looks like a scuffle between a couple. Well, when I saw her get out of the truck, her face is just all bloody. She looks like she just got in the car and left. This person has a maroon-colored truck, and I don't know what they were fighting over. The horn was honking, and I was trying to mind my own business till I saw her. Is the maroon truck still there? The maroon truck is still there, but the other vehicle was like a four-door, looked like a Cadillac almost, and it looks like that woman got in the car and left. But it's cream or light-colored, off-white. It looks like a Cadillac, to be honest. Okay, Julie, I gotta let you go, okay? Okay, all right. Bye-bye.
The woman disappeared into the night, leaving chaos in her wake. By the time officers arrived minutes later, it was too late. Tracy Mondabaugh, a 47-year-old mother of 4, was found slumped in the driver's seat of her boyfriend's truck. Seatbelt still buckled. She never even had the chance to take it off. A single stab wound had pierced her chest, straight through the heart. No signs of forced entry, no weapon left behind. But the killer hadn't vanished without a trace. Outside the truck, officers spotted something curious. A torn blue latex glove finger lying in the grass, like a breadcrumb from a grim fairy tale. Inside, blood and hair told the story of a violent struggle, one that had ended as quickly as it began. The question was not what had happened. That was horrifically clear. The question was why, and more urgently, who had done it. Witnesses described a disturbing scene, screams of possession and desperation. "He's mine, you can't have him," one neighbor recalled hearing. Rage, jealousy, obsession. It wasn't long before investigators turned their focus to one name, Michelle Boat. Michelle was no stranger to Tracy. In fact, she may have thought about her more than anyone else in the world. You see, Tracy was dating Michelle's husband. For 20 years, Michelle Boat had been Nick Boat's wife, the mother of his children, and the partner in a marriage that had long grown cold. According to Nick, those 2 decades had been filled with resentment, disconnection, and emotional isolation. But when Michelle found out that Nick had left her for another woman, this woman, her heartbreak didn't fade. It festered. It grew teeth. Police quickly discovered a chilling timeline. Michelle had been following Tracy, watching her, stalking her every move. Not once, not twice, but for weeks. A surveillance camera showed her Cadillac creeping behind Tracy's truck at a local Burger King. Another showed her circling a laundromat where Tracy had been only minutes earlier. Then there were the binoculars, the gloves, the gardening tools, the hidden towel stuffed into a toilet tank, the haunting message left on Nick's voicemail, directed at Tracy.
And tell the bitch, whore that you're sleeping with, she messed with the wrong mama.
A calendar hanging in Michelle's kitchen. Starting from March 12th, the day Nick left her, Michelle had marked each passing day with a single word. Gone, 69 days, one word, every single day. But what had Michelle really been counting down to? Was this the mental unraveling of a heartbroken wife in a pandemic world? Or was it something darker, something deliberate? When Michelle Boat was arrested later that night, she opened the door with a towel wrapped around her head, freshly showered. She acted surprised, calm, almost confused, but hidden behind her eyes was a storm the town of Pella would never forget. And when the trial began, the world would watch as a courtroom tried to unravel whether Michelle had snapped in a moment of emotional chaos or planned a meticulous, cold-blooded murder.
When I approached the vehicle or looked down inside the passenger window, I noticed down on the passenger side floorboard, there were several items that kind of caught my attention. One was blue rubber gloves. There appeared to be an orange hammer, a gardening spade, and looked like a flat bar or pry bar. Then up on the seat, there was a dark colored purse, a set of binoculars.
This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a countdown to catastrophe. Before the blood, before the screams, before the quiet streets of Pella, Iowa, were cordoned off by crime scene tape, there was a marriage. Michelle and Nick Boat had been together for 2 decades. They had built a life, 2 children, a shared home, and years of familiar patterns that sometimes felt more like obligation than love. But beneath the surface, the relationship was strained. Nick would later describe their 20 years together not with warmth, but with words like distant, cold, and loveless. He claimed Michelle had never truly been his, that she had always been emotionally tethered to someone else. Still, they stayed, out of duty, habit, and maybe fear of starting over. Then, in 2020, the world changed. As COVID-19 swept across the globe, panic and isolation became part of everyday life. The world outside was crumbling, and inside that crumbling world, Nick Boat found something unexpected, a new connection. Her name was Tracy Mondabaugh. She was 47 years old, a mother of 4 and a grandmother. She was kind, funny, and grounded. Her life hadn't been easy, but she faced it with warmth and resilience. One day by sheer accident or fate. Tracy sent Nick a friend request on Facebook. It was a mistake, but one that would alter the course of 3 lives. They began chatting, then calling, and eventually meeting in person. They bonded over a shared love of the outdoors. Their chemistry was instant. Nick said it felt like being reunited with someone he'd known forever. With Tracy, he didn't feel like a failure. He felt alive again. But Michelle noticed. On March 12th, 2020, Nick packed up and left the home he shared with Michelle. There was no dramatic confrontation, no heated final argument. When she returned from work, he was simply gone. That very day, Michelle began marking a calendar. One word written in the square for March the 12th, gone. She wrote the same word every day after that, over and over, 69 times. Michelle was spiraling. Her behavior grew unpredictable and alarming. She called Nick repeatedly. She stalked him and Tracy around town. She violated a court-issued no-contact order not once, but 4 separate times. Tracy reported Michelle's harassment to the police, told friends she feared being watched, followed. But no action was taken. Michelle was grieving, they said. She wasn't dangerous, just heartbroken. But heartbroken women don't keep latex gloves and binoculars in their cars. They don't leave glove fingers at crime scenes. They don't watch from across parking lots, night after night, memorizing the movements of their ex-husband's new partner. By April, Tracy had moved in with Nick at the Glenwood apartment complex. She wanted a fresh start, a sense of safety. But Michelle couldn't let go. She continued circling their block, observing, waiting, all while still marking that calendar. Gone, gone, gone.
I heard noises in the back and the drive, horns honking, raising a ruckus.
Inside Michelle, something was building, a storm. Not a sudden explosion of rage, but a slow, deliberate boil, fueled by rejection, by loneliness, by the belief that someone else had stolen the life she still believed was hers. And then, on May 18th, 2020, exactly 69 days since Nick had left, Michelle got into her car. She told herself she just wanted to see him, maybe talk, maybe plead for one last chance. But what she did next was far from a cry for reconciliation. It was something darker, something fatal. That night, Tracy Mondabaugh would be found stabbed to death in the front seat of a truck, still wearing her seatbelt. And Michelle Boat would tell the world that it wasn't planned, that it was a moment of passion, not premeditation. But the calendar, the gloves, the car full of tools, and the haunting voicemail she once left Tracy all pointed to a different truth. This wasn't just a heartbreak, it was a countdown. And at the end of that countdown was murder. It was just after 8 p.m. on May 18, 2020, when Tracy Mondabaugh pulled into the parking lot of the Glenwood Apartments, the place she now called home. She had just come from bringing dinner to Nick Boat at his job. They'd sat in the red Ford pickup truck together, sharing fast food and quiet conversation. She kissed him goodbye and drove off. It was a simple routine, one she had done many times before. But this time, someone was following her. Behind her, in the distance, was Michelle Boat. Michelle had tracked Tracy's every move that evening. Security footage would later show her Cadillac circling a laundromat as Tracy loaded clothes. When Tracy drove through the Burger King drive-thru to pick up dinner for Nick, Michelle stayed back, lurking behind another car, watching but staying hidden. At one point, she even stepped out of her car to retrieve something from the trunk. No one knows what it was. Tracy didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't realize she was being hunted. Michelle followed Tracy from Burger King to Nick's workplace. She watched them eat together in the cab of the truck, watched the goodbye kiss, watched as they parted ways, and then she followed Tracy home. It had been 69 days since Nick left. 69 days of loneliness, rejection, and obsession. But on that night, Michelle wasn't going to cry, call, or beg. She was going to act. According to Michelle, she didn't mean to hurt anyone. She claimed she just wanted to talk, to see Nick, to somehow fix what had already shattered. But what followed was not the desperate plea of a grieving wife. It was an ambush. Tracy had barely parked when Michelle approached the truck. There was a confrontation, brief, volatile, and deadly. A witness in the apartment complex would later report hearing the shriek of a woman's voice yelling, "He's mine! You can't have him!"
I heard noises in the back and the drive, horns honking, raising a ruckus.
Moments later, that same witness saw a woman stumble away from the truck, blood on her face, and disappear into the night.
Pella Police Department. Over in the sixth block next to me, I just went outside on the desk to smoke a cigarette, and it looked like a scuffle between a couple. Well, when I saw her get out of the truck, her face is just all bloody. She looked like she just got in the car and left. This person has a maroon-colored truck, and I don't know what they were fighting over. The horn was honking.
When police arrived just minutes after the 911 call, they found Tracy slumped in the driver's seat, her seatbelt still fastened. She hadn't even had time to remove it. A single stab wound pierced her chest, directly through the heart. She was pronounced dead at the scene. But Michelle had left behind more than just a body. Scattered near the truck was a torn piece of a blue latex glove, the fingertip missing. Blood and hair inside the vehicle told of a sudden, vicious struggle. Investigators quickly traced the truck back to Nick Boat. It wasn't Tracy's vehicle, it was his, registered in his name. The silver Cadillac that multiple witnesses had described was registered to Nick's estranged wife, Michelle. By the time police reached Michelle's house, only 17 minutes had passed since the murder. The Cadillac was parked outside. Its hood was still warm. Blood was found on the side mirror. And inside, gloves, gardening tools, a hammer, and most notably, a pair of binoculars, their lens caps removed and set beside the driver's seat, as if someone had been watching, waiting. Michelle eventually answered the door. She appeared calm, surprised, said she had just been taking a shower, but something was off. Inside the house, police found the washing machine mid-cycle. A single outfit was being washed. Jeans, a top, socks, undergarments. All of it soaked, spinning. In the bathroom, a set of car keys sat on the counter. Attached to the key fob was a long, dark hair, consistent with Tracy's. And in the toilet tank, they found the missing glove finger, stuffed inside a white towel, blood-stained, torn, a perfect match to the glove fragment found at the crime scene. Still, Michelle said it wasn't murder. She insisted she didn't go there with the intention to kill. She claimed Tracy hit her first, that she reached into her own car and grabbed a knife only in the heat of the moment.
And I wanted her to leave him. And I got out of the truck. I got out of the car. And I went around
to talk to her. And I opened the truck door and she started hitting me and screaming at me, calling me a crazy bitch. She was hitting me and hitting me and hitting me, and I had my hands up. She's yelling at me. I just snapped and I grabbed the knife and I just stabbed her and I dropped the knife and I went back around the car and went home.
But Tracy was still wearing her seatbelt. She hadn't tried to run, hadn't even unbuckled. She likely never saw it coming. Michelle left the scene, discarded evidence, took a shower, and put her clothes in the wash. When the police informed her that Tracy was dead, her response was chilling. God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? This was no accident. This wasn't an impulsive act. This was a countdown, followed by execution. The trial of Michelle Boat began with a quiet tension that settled over the courtroom like dust. She entered wearing a mask, not just the cloth one required during the pandemic, but the hardened expression of someone trying not to flinch under the weight of murder. Across from her sat the family of Tracy Mondabaugh, eyes hollowed by grief, waiting to hear how a woman they loved had been reduced to a name on a docket in a single, fatal wound. The prosecution moved swiftly. They laid out a timeline, methodical, chilling, and damning. They walked the jury through the days leading up to May 18th, the surveillance footage, the stalking, the gloves, the torn fingertip, the blood spatter. They showed how Michelle had ample opportunity to walk away, to cool down, to change her mind. But instead, she followed Tracy across town like a predator tracking prey. Then came the calendar. Day by day, Michelle had marked "gone" on her kitchen wall, counting from the moment her husband walked out. To the state, this wasn't a coping mechanism. It was a countdown, an emotional fuse that had finally reached its explosive end. Prosecutors painted Michelle as a woman obsessed, enraged, and determined to eliminate the one person she blamed for losing her husband. The evidence felt overwhelming. A glove piece matching the crime scene hidden in a toilet tank, binoculars in the car, a house staged for cleanup. And that haunting final response to police: God works in mysterious ways. But Michelle's defense wasn't giving up without a fight. She took the stand in her own defense, a rare and risky move. She spoke softly, often through tears, telling the jury about her devastation, her drinking binges, her mental breakdowns after Nick left.
Did you tell them that you stabbed Tracy?
No.
Did you tell them that you hadn't seen Tracy in months?
Yes, that's what I told them. I lied to the police because I knew I was in trouble and I was scared and I didn't know what to do. I was so scared.
She said she wasn't herself, that she'd been pushed to the edge, that she'd been isolated by the pandemic and blindsided by betrayal. Her defense team didn't deny the stabbing. They didn't even deny the stalking. But they insisted this wasn't murder. It was manslaughter, a tragic, heat-of-the-moment response to unbearable emotional pain. Michelle claimed Tracy had hit her first, that she reached into her car, grabbed the knife without thinking, and snapped. She didn't mean to kill her, she said. She just lost control. But the prosecution didn't buy it. They returned to the glove, the surveillance, the moment Michelle got out of her car to retrieve something from the trunk. Was it the knife? The gloves? Whatever it wasn't an accident. It wasn't heat of the moment. It was preparation. They emphasized how poorly the cover-up was executed, not because Michelle hadn't planned the attack, but because she didn't plan to get caught. In closing arguments, the state reminded the jury, Tracy never had a chance. She didn't even unbuckle her seatbelt. And Michelle? She had gloves, she had a knife, she had motive, and she had time to make a different choice.
They asked you questions.
Yes.
You denied knowing anything about Tracy's killing.
Yes, I did.
They asked you multiple times to tell them your side of the story, right?
Yes.
And then the police tell you Tracy has been hurt seriously, right?
Yes, yes.
And your response was, God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?
Yes, I said that.
After just 45 minutes of deliberation, they returned with a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder.
A Marion County jury has found Michelle Boat guilty of first-degree murder.
Yeah, ruling quickly today, the jury found the Pella woman intentionally killed Tracy Mondabaugh, the girlfriend of her estranged husband. KCCI's Scott Carpenter is here now with the prosecution's closing argument and the moment the verdict was announced.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
The jury ruling that Michelle Boat is guilty of the most serious charge possible. The defense had argued for a voluntary manslaughter charge. Her attorneys claim that Boat acted in the heat of passion when she followed Tracy Mondabaugh home and stabbed her in the heart while she was still wearing her seatbelt. The prosecution told the jury that Boat killed Mondabaugh because she finally had the opportunity.
As Tracy Mondabaugh pulled into 101 Glenwood and put the truck in park, turned off the ignition for the last time, Michelle Boat saw her opportunity and she took it.
The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the words. Michelle Boat stood stone still as the weight of a life sentence settled onto her shoulders. There would be no parole, no second chance, just the echo of what she had taken and the silence left behind. After the verdict, the courtroom emptied slowly. There was no celebration, no cheers, just weary silence and the soft sounds of crying, some for relief, others for devastation. Because while justice had been served, there were no winners, only survivors. Tracy Mondabaugh's family, her children, grandchildren, siblings, had to leave that courthouse knowing she was never coming back. The woman they described as funny, bright, and fiercely loving had been taken from them in a moment of senseless violence. And for what? A relationship? A man? A jealousy that bloomed into rage? For Nick Boat, the guilt was impossible to avoid. He sat through the trial as both witness and reluctant catalyst. He had loved Tracy, that much was clear. But the weight of his choices, of ending one relationship and beginning another so quickly, pressed heavily against him. His testimony, filled with visible grief, painted him as someone trying to move on, only to see his past drag destruction into his future. He would later say that the last image he had of Tracy was her waving goodbye as he returned to work that night, completely unaware that she was being followed to her death. Michelle Boat was transferred to Iowa Correctional Institution for Women, where she began serving her mandatory life sentence without parole.
Ms. Boat, I'll have you stand and listen to the reading of the verdict. In the matter of the state of Iowa versus Michelle Lee Boat, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree, verdict form number 1. Is that your verdict, members of the jury?
She was 56 years old. In her appeal, she tried to argue that the jury hadn't fully considered her mental state, that the conviction of first-degree murder ignored the chaos of her mind in those final hours. But in February 2024, the Iowa Court of Appeals upheld the original sentence.
How did you feel when you realized on March 12th that Nick had left?
Heartbroken, sad, despondent, devastated, destroyed. Like my whole life had just walked out the door.
How is the pandemic affecting my life? I just didn't have anything. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any food. I didn't have anybody to talk to about my situation. You know.
And you weren't getting work at the hospital?
I wasn't getting work at the hospital.
Her actions, they said, were not just tragic, they were calculated. Back in Pella, life moved on. But not really. The apartment complex where the murder happened would never feel the same. Neighbors who heard the scream that night would relive it over and over. Some even moved away. Others kept porch lights on a little longer. Parents pulled their kids inside a little earlier. For Tracy's children, the loss came like a blackout.
I just watched her and I followed her to wherever she was going because I wanted to know where my husband was living.
One moment she was sending texts, making plans, giving advice. The next she was gone. Her grandchildren would never know her laugh. Her daughters would never get her guidance. Her name would forever be followed by the words murder victim, something she never deserved to be. But in the grief, there was also something else, remembrance. Friends and family began sharing stories about Tracy's laugh, her sarcasm, her kindness. They planted a tree in her memory, shared her photos online, made sure her life wouldn't be defined by her death, but by how she lived. In every one of those stories, Tracy was the center of gravity, the calm, the warmth, the heart. And perhaps that's the cruelest part of this tragedy, because at its core, this wasn't about a love triangle or a spontaneous snap. This was about control, about one woman who couldn't let go, about a marriage that had ended, but whose shadow stretched far enough to consume someone entirely uninvolved. Michelle Boat said she felt like her whole life had walked out the door when Nick left, but in trying to reclaim it, she destroyed someone else's. In the end, the case of Michelle Boat and the murder of Tracy Mondabaugh wasn't just about a crime, it was about choices. It was about what happens when heartbreak turns into fixation, when pain curdles into entitlement, and when one person decides that their suffering justifies someone else's end. Michelle chose to follow Tracy. She chose to stalk, to threaten, to wait. She chose to bring gloves, to get out of her car, and to confront a woman who had never wronged her, other than by falling in love with someone Michelle believed still belonged to her. That belief, twisted and poisoned by jealousy, became a weapon far more dangerous than any knife. And it's a chilling reminder of how easily tragedy can emerge from obsession, how fast love can be distorted into possession. Tracy's death wasn't the result of a random act of violence. It was the endpoint of a pattern, a slow, steady descent into something dark. And no one stopped it in time. But if there's anything to take from this story, perhaps it's this. People leave. They move on. They change. Hearts break. Lives shift. And no matter how much it hurts, we always have a choice in how we respond. We can seek healing, or we can seek revenge. One path leads to closure. The other leads to prison walls and permanent loss. Tracy Mondabaugh had every right to rebuild her life. She was doing what so many of us try to do after pain. Move forward, love again, start over. She didn't deserve them.
What kind of gun is it?
It's a Glock 19, it's Gen 3, it's all legal. I have all the paperwork in my wallet.
Okay. What's your name?
Austin 5, you should be less
Austin Green?
Actually 3.
I got his idea too. Alright, hang tight, Austin, okay? Are you hurt or anything?
In the early morning hours of May 8th, 2021, a frantic 911 call pierced the stillness of a quiet residential street.
154 Central, we have a GSW to the head. He's breathing, not conscious.
Is he going to be in front of 6 John Driver? Turn around! On your knees!
Get your car down here.
Why couldn't you just leave well enough alone, dude?
Pat him down. She made a statement when we were putting her in the car that he hit her.
Yeah, that's what he was telling me too, that he was smashing on her windows, beating down his girl, so we shot him.
The caller was nearly incoherent, breathless and shaking, uttering fragments of horror about a man lying in the street, blood seeping from his skull. Moments later, police would arrive to a scene straight out of a psychological thriller. A young man, 26-year-old Michael Tripp, was found dying in the road, the apparent victim of a gunshot to the head. But as officers began their investigation, the story they would uncover would spiral into something far more twisted than a simple act of violence. This is not just a story about a shooting. It's a story about obsession, betrayal, and a love triangle so volatile that it exploded into murder. What began as a romantic falling out soon escalated into a deadly trap, one that might have been carefully planned by someone the victim trusted most. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The first officers on the scene encountered Austin Green, standing just feet away from the bloodied body.
47, tell him Shave is stepping up.
Okay, we've got him in rough. Already one. Is he going to be in front of 6 John Driver?
Turn around. On your knees. Lay down your stomach. Sorry, say that again. Get down to your side. Don't move.
He reportedly said just one thing. I told him to leave. He wouldn't stop. With him was Riley Young, the only person who could explain what led to this fatal confrontation. Or so it seemed. What followed was a painstaking investigation that would stretch into hours of interrogation, surveillance footage, digital forensics, and a deep dive into the private lives of 3 people whose relationships with one another blurred the line between love and manipulation. At the heart of the storm stood Riley, a young mother and girlfriend torn between 2 men. Or was she the one pulling the strings all along? Riley and Austin insisted it was self-defense, that Michael was the aggressor.
I loved him to death. I did not mean to do it. I just wanted him to stop. He wouldn't stop. I was just trying to go home and go to bed so I could get my kids. He just kept going. He kept screaming. He just wouldn't stop, man. He was like an animal just got released out of a cage, and he was just going for everybody's head.
That he had become unhinged, stalking Riley, harassing her, threatening to burn down Austin's trailer with the children inside. That he punched both of them just moments before the gunshot rang out.
We all jumped because he was breaking windows at 2:30 in the morning, and he's standing there, he was yelling and screaming.
What's he saying?
You're gonna talk to me or I'm gonna catch this house on fire. And Austin walked outside and he's always got his gun on his hip.
She made a statement when we were putting her in the car that he hit her.
Yeah, that's what he was telling me too, that he was smashing on her windows, beating out his girl, so he shot him.
Was this shooting the tragic climax of a toxic emotional web, or something far more premeditated? Consider this. Riley had only broken up with Austin 2 weeks prior. She quickly moved on to Michael, Austin's best friend.
I just want to get all the relationship figured out, and then we can go into everything that happened. So you guys broke up 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Did you know Michael before, or did you guys just meet?
He was Austin's best friend.
Okay. So after, were you guys talking pre-breakup, or was it after breakup that the relationship started? Were you just talking to, hooking up with, dating?
Pretty much hooking up with him. Post a few pictures of us on Facebook, and then I was like...
So talking, or...
Yeah. Something
more
like
than hooking up, not quite dating relationship.
Yeah.
Then just days before the shooting, she showed signs of wanting to reconcile with Austin. Texts, calls, and in-person conversations hinted at mixed messages. Jealousy was simmering. So was rage. And somewhere between the lies, the truth slipped. During the interrogation, both Riley and Austin told their stories. Austin claimed he acted out of fear, that Michael's violent outburst forced his hand. Riley, however, painted herself as a victim caught in the crossfire of 2 men fighting for her affection. But detectives noticed something odd. Her demeanor remained calm, even when recounting the exact moment Michael was shot. There were no tears, no panic, just matter-of-fact storytelling that didn't quite match the horror of what had happened. If you were to hear her speak, you might think she was describing a bad date, not the violent death of a man she'd called her boyfriend just days earlier. Then came the surveillance footage. It captured moments leading up to the fatal shot. Riley chasing Michael, Austin confronting him. The subtle but crucial seconds where everything changed. And then, the flash of a muzzle.
Dude, what do you do? What do you do when the guy's eyes bulging out of his head and there's brain laying out?
I don't have any
Yeah, I don't know what to do with him, man. It's to the head and he's bleeding out, man. There's nothing I can do. He's got blood everywhere, man. He can't hear.
This video dives deep into part 1 of the interrogation that followed, where police pressed both Austin and Riley for answers. Where truths were bent, motives questioned, and cracks in the facade began to show. It's an emotional roller coaster of confession, deflection, and silent stares that say more than words ever could. But this is just the beginning. As you'll soon discover, nothing is what it seems. And when love turns deadly, the truth dies with it, unless someone talks. In a quiet corner of Monroe County, Michigan, the early hours of May 8, 2021, began like any other, until they didn't. By sunrise, an entire community would be rattled by a gruesome discovery in the middle of a neighborhood street. A young man, 26-year-old Michael Tripp, lay dying from a gunshot wound to the head. The blood was still fresh. The fear was still thick in the air. Neighbors, awakened by sirens and flashing lights, watched in stunned silence as police cordoned off the area, knowing that something terrible had happened, but having no idea just how dark this tragedy truly was.
The kid ran out and the window's busted out right there. The glass is flying in through the living room. And I didn't run outside when all this happened. I'm not a confrontational person and shit. So when this happened, I stayed inside with the dog and shit.
Who was all in the house?
It was just Riley and Austin.
Okay. I don't know.
Michael Tripp?
I don't know.
Well, Austin was with Riley. Okay. And she cheated with him, with Michael. And then they started, together, and...
Your sister and Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that's why this happened.
So is this like a ongoing thing that happened recently with her cheating and this baby mama drama?
Yeah, it just happened.
Okay. So, Mr. Green and... What's the guy's... Michael Tripp?
Yeah, Michael Tripp.
Okay. So they got some bad blood there, obviously.
He was staying in his house rent-free and girl behind his back.
At first glance, it seemed like an open and shut case. There was a shooter, a motive, and witnesses. Austin Green, who remained at the scene, didn't run. He didn't resist arrest. Instead, he waited, pacing and sobbing, his hands raised as police approached. According to initial reports, he had acted in self-defense. But as the minutes passed and officers began interviewing him and his girlfriend, Riley Young, an unsettling realization began to surface. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. It was the result of weeks, perhaps months, of tangled emotions, broken loyalties, and psychological unraveling. Michael Tripp wasn't just any man. He was Austin's best friend, or at least he had been. That friendship began to fall apart when Riley, the mother of Austin's children, abruptly left him and started a new relationship with Michael. What followed was an emotional spiral that saw jealousy harden into resentment and love curdle into something dangerously close to hatred. Within 2 short weeks, Riley had gone from committed partner to ex-girlfriend, from nurturing mother to a woman caught between 2 men, both vying for control, affection, or maybe just closure. But Riley wasn't merely a pawn in this story. Some would say she was the queen. As detectives dug deeper, they learned that Riley had been the connecting thread between Austin and Michael, even long before the fatal night. She had history with both men. With Austin, she shared children, a home, and a turbulent past. With Michael, she shared a newly ignited romance, one that seemed to bloom too quickly and too fiercely for comfort. But what truly raised eyebrows was her behavior in the hours leading up to the murder, and especially after it. When interviewed, Riley appeared composed, even clinical. She answered questions as if recounting an inconvenience, not a traumatic loss. No tears, no panic, just cold recollection. Meanwhile, Austin's emotional state was unraveling in real time. He told police he didn't mean for any of this to happen, that Michael had shown up at his home in a rage, smashed his front window, and threatened to set his trailer on fire, with his children inside. That he'd begged Michael to leave, to de-escalate, to stop. But Michael wouldn't. And when he allegedly hit Riley, then Austin, that's when Austin pulled the trigger. That's when everything stopped. But what if Michael didn't come looking for a fight? What if he came because Riley told him to? What if this was less about a crime of passion and more about a carefully staged confrontation? Police began to suspect just that, and their suspicions grew stronger with every frame of surveillance footage they reviewed, with every text message they recovered from Riley's phone. It became increasingly clear that someone wasn't telling the whole truth. In fact, someone might have planned the whole thing. Now imagine being in that interrogation room. On one side of the table, a young father sobbing into his hands, confessing to a killing he claims he didn't want to commit. On the other, a calm, calculating partner, recounting the night in a tone almost too calm. Between them lies the truth, but it's hidden beneath layers of manipulation, emotion, and silence. This is the story of what happens when a love triangle becomes a ticking time bomb, when heartbreak morphs into obsession, and when 3 lives crash together with irreversible consequences. It begins with a gunshot, but where it ends, that's what we're here to uncover. The night everything unraveled began with a knock, or more accurately, a crash. At approximately 2:30 a.m., while Austin Green sat in his trailer eating a late-night meal, a sudden shattering of glass interrupted the quiet. Michael Tripp had arrived. Not with peace, not with closure, but with chaos. Michael, by then desperate and emotionally spiraling, had come to confront Riley, to confront Austin, or maybe just to confront the pain of rejection. According to Austin's testimony, he was sitting on the couch with Riley and a friend, Brian, when Michael smashed in the front window with either his fist or an object. No one could say for sure, but what followed was anything but ambiguous.
Who's
at Austin's?
Me, Austin, Brian, and my dog. So I was sitting on the love seat with Austin, and he was eating Taco Bell. I was talking to him. Brian was sitting on the big couch, and all of a sudden, all you hear is crash. All of my front window got busted, and he's like, "What the f are you doing here?"
Michael says that?
Yeah.
So you hear a crash?
Yeah, I hear the window get broken, and we all jump because who's breaking windows at 2:30 in the morning?
Michael, standing outside the broken glass, screamed Riley's name. He hurled accusations. He demanded explanations. He threatened to set the trailer ablaze. Inside were Austin's children, though thankfully not that night. His threats were loud, vivid, and repeated. But most of all, they were terrifying. Austin's first instinct, he says, was to grab his gun, not to shoot, not to intimidate, but to protect.
And said the first thing you did was grab your gun?
Yes.
Okay. What type of gun was it?
It's a Glock 19 Gen 3.
Okay.
It's a 30-round clip. It's legal. It's all in my name.
Okay. Where was that at inside the trailer?
It was sitting on my little TV table right next to my couch.
Okay.
The Glock 19 he retrieved was legal, registered in his name, and always kept within reach. This was Monroe, after all, a town where many believed in the right to defend themselves, and Austin was no different. He had bought the weapon not to kill, but to feel safe in a neighborhood that didn't always feel like home. He stepped outside and faced his best friend, now an unrecognizable heartbreak. Austin begged him to leave. Riley begged him to leave. Even Brian asked Michael to walk away, but Michael stayed.
You're not in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We just got a lot of stuff we got to do right now, so...
I don't even know what happened, man. He came and busted the window out, and then Riley, it's a long story, Riley and that guy were, messing around and stuff, but this is the father of her children's house. She's only been gone from here for not even 2 weeks. So she came back, she wanted to come home, and dude ran up and punched the window out. So she came out here to come talk to him, and then Austin walked out to make sure she was okay, and I guess dude hit Riley or something. The girl, I guess dude hit Riley, and then all I heard was...
He wasn't holding a weapon, but in that moment, his rage was enough to ignite a fire. According to multiple accounts, he dared Austin to shoot. He screamed, "Put your gun down and fight me!" He spat venom about taking Riley back. He told Austin to kill him, over and over again, and then he walked away, only to be chased by Riley. That's when everything crossed the line. Surveillance footage from a nearby trailer captured the moments that followed. Riley running after Michael, Austin gun in hand, not far behind. A scuffle, raised voices, a brief, violent struggle, and then a single gunshot. Michael fell. It's the details here that changed everything. Riley would later tell police that Michael had grabbed her, tried to pull her hoodie, threatened her. Austin said he watched his friend hit Riley, then him, before instinct took over.
Grabbed onto my hoodie, and I was like, let the f go with me, and I got loud.
Did he only grab your hoodie once?
He grabbed my hoodie twice, like once while I was walking, and I just like jerked away from him and kept walking, and then he did it again. So Austin grabbed him when he saw him hit me, and he hit Austin in the mouth, and then I turned my head, and then I just kind of heard the gunshot.
But the camera, impartial and cold, only captured the flash, the moment that cannot be taken back. And what of Riley's actions? Why had she chased Michael down the street when she had every opportunity to stay inside? Why confront the man she claimed to fear? Detectives would later question her motivations. Her behavior during interrogation was unnerving, calm, composed, too clean. Austin, by contrast, unraveled. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, he called 911. When no one answered, he called his mother. He left the gun on the porch, hands raised high when officers arrived. His voice trembled. His words spilled out in a blur. I told him to stop. I told him to leave. He hit me. He hit her. I didn't want to do it. But intention is one thing. Action is another. What began as a desperate confrontation between broken lovers had ended in irreversible tragedy. A man was dead, a father was in custody, and a woman stood between two versions of the same story. The police secured the scene, they collected the shell casing, they retrieved the surveillance footage, and they placed both Riley and Austin in separate interrogation rooms. Rooms where time would stretch, emotions would bend, and the truth would start to seep through the cracks. As the clock ticked past dawn, one thing was certain. This was not a random act. It was the inevitable climax of a relationship built on lies, possessiveness, and perhaps something far darker. Detectives weren't just dealing with a shooting. They were unraveling a psychological puzzle, a test of credibility, a dance between fact and fiction, one that would pit loyalty against law and love against truth. What really happened in those final seconds before the shot? Why didn't anyone walk away before it was too late? Was this a spontaneous act of fear or a premeditated execution disguised as self-defense? The answers, they hoped, would emerge in the interrogation room. The courtroom was packed, not with strangers, but with people who knew the victim, the defendant, and the woman at the center of it all. Mothers, friends, neighbors. They filled the wooden benches and waited in tense silence as the trial of Austin Green began. On one side sat a man accused of murder. On the other, the empty space once occupied by Michael Tripp. Now a memory wrapped in grief. At the heart of the case was a single question. Was this self-defense or something far more sinister? The prosecution didn't hesitate. They painted a picture of Austin as a man boiling with jealousy and betrayal. He wasn't just defending his home, they argued. He was avenging his pride. They pointed to his possession of multiple firearms, the preemptive decision to grab a gun, and most damningly, the surveillance footage that captured the final chase. He pursued the victim, the prosecutor said, and then he pulled the trigger. This was not defense. This was retaliation. But the defense countered with a gripping emotional plea. They reminded the jury that Michael had broken a window, threatened to kill Austin and his children, and physically assaulted both Austin and Riley. The defense team leaned heavily on Austin's call to 911, his immediate surrender, and his lack of criminal history. This is not the face of a murderer, his attorney argued. This is a man who was pushed beyond his limits. He feared for his life. He feared for his family. As expected, Riley Young took the stand. And when she did, the tension in the room was palpable. Her testimony was methodical, controlled. She described Michael's obsession, his violent temper, and the fear she felt that night. She insisted Austin didn't want to fire his weapon. She claimed she had chased Michael only to protect her children and de-escalate the situation. But the prosecution saw something else in her calm demeanor: manipulation. They reminded the jury that Riley had moved on quickly from Austin to Michael, that she had sent messages to both men in the hours before the shooting, fanning emotional flames, that she had been the one to escalate the situation by leaving the house, chasing after Michael, and drawing Austin into a fatal confrontation. Was she a victim or a trigger? The jury was left with a tangled narrative. On one hand, a distraught father who claimed he only acted out of fear. On the other, a man who pursued his victim with a loaded weapon and threading it all together. A woman whose presence and decisions shaped the entire tragedy. Deliberations took days. Emotions ran high. Families sobbed in the hallways. The community remained divided. Was Austin a protector or a killer? In the end, the jury delivered a verdict that stunned everyone. Guilty, but not of murder. The charge was reduced to manslaughter, with the court acknowledging the complexity of the situation and the presence of mitigating factors. The judge sentenced Austin to 12 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 7. Riley Young walked out of the courtroom that day a free woman, but not without scrutiny. Though she wasn't charged, whispers followed her wherever she went. The court may have cleared her of legal guilt, but in the court of public opinion, her role in Michael Tripp's death was far from forgotten. The trial may have ended, but the questions didn't. The dust settled, the cameras left, but the consequences of that night rippled through Monroe like a stone dropped into still water. For Michael Tripp's family, there was no justice that could bring back their son. He was 26 years old, a friend, a brother, a young man whose final moments were spent pleading or provoking, or perhaps both. His mother kept his photos up in the window long after the trial, hoping that time would not erase memory. Austin Green, now inmate 407631, entered the Michigan correctional system as a man broken. In his first year behind bars, he reportedly struggled with depression, suffered panic attacks, and requested to be placed on watch. The weight of what he'd done, or what he'd failed to prevent, hung around his neck like an anchor. He wrote frequent letters to his children, none to Riley. Back home, Riley Young's life took a turn she hadn't expected. Though legally untouched, she was ostracized by many in her community. Employers were hesitant to hire her, neighbors avoided her, her social media accounts were flooded with accusations, taunts, even death threats. She eventually moved out of Monroe, hoping to start fresh. But reputations like hers don't vanish. They follow like shadows. The case also sparked deeper conversations throughout the town. Conversations about domestic violence, about self-defense laws, about emotional manipulation. Families argued over dinner tables. Churches held open forums. Local politicians debated firearm legislation and mental health support. Meanwhile, the truth remained elusive. To this day, people ask, did Riley know what would happen that night? Did Austin truly fear for his life? Or did rage consume him? And perhaps most importantly, did Michael Tripp deserve to die? 5 years later, a local documentary filmmaker released a short feature titled, When Love Kills the Tripp Triangle. It pieced together 911 calls, interviews, court records, and community reactions. The video went viral, reigniting debates, reopening wounds, and once again casting Riley and Austin into the public eye. Riley, in a rare interview, said only this: "We were all broken. I wish I could change what happened, but I can't, and I have to live with that." Austin, speaking through his attorney, maintained, "I did what I had to do. I wish I didn't, but I had no choice." And maybe that's the most haunting part of this entire tragedy. Not the gunshot, not the verdict, not even the lies, but the gray. That hazy, uncomfortable place between guilt and innocence, between hero and villain, between love and destruction. In the end, 3 lives collided under the weight of heartbreak, betrayal, and fear. One was lost forever, one was locked away, and one walked free, haunted by a silence louder than any sentence a court could deliver. In stories like these, there are no winners, only survivors. What began as a complicated love triangle spiraled into a tragedy fueled by emotion, desperation, and broken communication. The death of Michael Tripp didn't just mark the loss of a life, it marked the unraveling of trust, the destruction of relationships, and the haunting reminder that love, when distorted by manipulation and fear, can become lethal. For the investigators, this was one of the most complex cases they'd ever faced. Not because of the physical evidence, but because of the psychology, the blurred lines between victim and perpetrator, the hidden intentions behind every word spoken, the subtle manipulations that led 3 people to the brink and 1 over the edge. It's easy to judge from the outside, to pick a side, to say who was right, who was wrong, who should have walked away. But when emotions run deep, when betrayal burns, and when fear pulses through every heartbeat, the answers aren't so simple. And sometimes, in the tangle of truth and lies, justice becomes a matter of perspective. Michael Tripp's story doesn't end with the shot that took his life. It lives on in the silence that followed, in the questions that were never fully answered, in the children left behind, in the community left fractured. Let his story be a cautionary tale about unchecked rage, about emotional manipulation, about the cost of not walking away, because sometimes what you think is love is really just the beginning of a tragedy waiting to unfold. If this story gripped you, made you question what you thought you knew about love and loyalty, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We uncover the stories that others won't tell, the ones hiding in the gray. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and stay safe.
It was a shocking death. A photographer killed after a section of a tree somehow fell on top of her.
While investigators are searching for answers as to what exactly happened to her.
May not have been an accident.
We came back because some guy told us that some woman got smashed.
Were you a part of it, Jordan?
I didn't push it off, but I moved the log with him. I pulled it out. I didn't know he was going to kick it off though.
A woman lost her life and you knew it.
The morning light filtered through the thick canopy of Hocking Hills State Park, casting long shadows across the ancient rock formations and whispering trees. It was a serene September day in 2019, warm, calm, and full of the kind of stillness nature reserves often gift to early risers. Deep within the Old Man's Cave Trail, Victoria Schaefer, a beloved local photographer, steadied her camera. She was capturing the golden light that kissed the mossy stones and the smiling faces of high school seniors posed in front of waterfalls and gorges carved by time itself. Her clients laughed and chatted just steps away, their voices echoing off sandstone walls. She adjusted her lens, focused on her subject, and then, without warning, the forest screamed. A deafening crack, a rush of movement, then silence. A 6-foot log, nearly 75 pounds of dead weight, crashed down from the ridge above, striking Victoria squarely in the head. She died instantly. No one screamed at first. Shock rippled through the group. What had just happened? Did the branch fall naturally? Was this a freak accident? The kind that lurks in hiking safety disclaimers but rarely comes to pass? Then, the screams began. A 911 call rang out through static and panic.
Where are we? 911, where's your emergency?
Okay, we're out Hocking Hills and a huge tree branch fell on this lady. It's in her glasses.
You're at Old Man's Cave?
Yes.
Okay, and what happened?
A tree branch fell on her.
You're safe. Slow down. I can't understand you. What happened?
A tree branch fell on her.
A tree branch fell on someone.
But as first responders rushed to the scene and secured the wooded area, questions began to stir like wind through the trees. This was no ordinary accident. The log's ends were cleanly cut, unnatural, deliberate. Other logs nearby seemed similarly disturbed. Even more troubling, fresh footprints led to and from the overlook above. And then there were the witnesses. Several reported seeing teenage boys running from the area just after the log had fallen. A woman was dead, and it was no accident. News spread quickly across Logan, Ohio, a quiet town nestled in the heartland.
It was a shocking death. A photographer taking students' senior photos.
Killed by a rolling log at the Hocking Hills State Park.
And now investigators say 2 or 3 people may be responsible for her death.
The group was following along this trail back to the parking lot when out of nowhere a 70-plus pound log came crashing down from above, crushing the photographer.
Hocking Hills was known for its beauty, its hiking trails, its postcard-perfect landscapes. But that day, it became a crime scene. Detectives worked tirelessly, canvassing the area, interviewing park visitors, and fielding calls.
It was shock, because as much as I wanted answers and everybody wanted answers, I don't know that I thought that we were going to get any.
Then a break came. Quiet, almost too quiet. A local mother reported a tip. Her daughter had received a strange text from a friend, a cryptic message that read, "I did something serious at the park today with someone else."
The arrests were made after authorities say they got a tip that one of the suspects had texted another student that he'd done something serious at the park.
Within hours, 2 names surfaced: Jordan Buckley and Jaden Churchius. Teenagers, locals, not strangers. Not mysterious criminals lurking in the woods. Just 2 high school boys out on a hike, like hundreds of others before them. But something had gone terribly wrong. Or worse, something had been done terribly wrong.
Jordan Buckley apparently was one of the 2 boys at the park who partook in the branch falling down and hitting Miss Schrafer.
When police brought Jordan in for questioning, they expected resistance. What they got instead was a tangled web of hesitations, half-truths, and a slow, unraveling confession. At first, he played innocent, nervous, and twitchy under the weight of a state trooper's calm, probing voice. "I didn't do anything," he insisted. "We were just walking around." But as minutes turned into hours and the investigators' questions became sharper, Jordan's story shifted. First, he admitted to being there, then to seeing the log, then to helping move it. And finally, he said it. Jaden had thrown the log off the cliff.
Me and Jaden walked all the way farther down, like clear to the end, not where the metal bridge is. This guy did say that to us, but we did end up going back down. But I skipped a part of what we did. We walked all the way down to the end of this, and Jaden kicked off a branch. Not a branch, it was a log. It was a big log, like probably this wide, this long, and he kicked it, and it rolled off the cliff, and it made a loud bang, so we ran. And we ran into Miranda and AJ. They had no idea. We didn't tell them anything was happening.
That log?
Yeah, it's that log.
That log.
Mm-hmm. He just kicked it.
"I didn't know it would hit someone," Jordan murmured, more to himself than to the officer. "We were just messing around." But someone was dead. A mother, a wife, a woman simply doing her job. And suddenly, messing around wasn't so innocent. What followed was a dramatic series of interviews, reenactments, and taped conversations that revealed just how recklessly one moment can shatter countless lives. 2 teenage boys, one deadly decision, and a small town grappling with how to mourn a tragedy that could have been prevented. Was it a prank gone wrong, a reckless impulse, or something more sinister? As we step into the heart of this gripping investigation, through police interviews, first-hand accounts, and courtroom drama, we are forced to ask, how do you measure guilt in the eyes of youth? And when is remorse too little, too late? It was the kind of September morning that felt almost too perfect. The air was crisp but not cold, the sky clear as polished glass. Dew clung to the edges of wildflowers, and the rustle of leaves was the only sound disturbing the forest hush. At Hocking Hills State Park in southeastern Ohio, a popular destination known for its deep gorges, cascading waterfalls, and towering cliffs, life moved at the gentle pace of nature. Photographers, hikers, and families filled the trails. Among them, 44-year-old Victoria Schaefer. Victoria had come that morning to do what she loved most: capture moments. A professional photographer, she often shot outdoor portraits, and today was no different. She had arranged to meet a group of high school students for senior pictures near Old Man's Cave, one of the park's most iconic spots. With camera in hand, she was guiding her subjects, adjusting the lens, finding the light. She had no way of knowing that, within minutes, her own life would be extinguished in an instant. The sound came without warning, a sickening crack that echoed through the canyon. A log, 6 feet long and weighing roughly 75 pounds, plummeted from the cliff above and struck Victoria in the head. The impact was fatal. Chaos followed. The students screamed. A bystander called 911 in a panic, her voice shaking as she struggled to describe the location. "Old Man's Cave," she stammered. "A tree branch. "It hit a woman. Please send help." Rescue teams arrived quickly, but it was too late. Victoria Schaefer was dead, her body crumpled beneath the massive log. At first, it seemed like a freak accident. Tragic, but not unheard of in a forest setting. Trees fall, branches break. People are in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as emergency responders surveyed the scene, something didn't feel right. The log had clean-cut ends, not jagged, broken, or weather-worn like a naturally fallen limb. It was unnaturally placed. Nearby, other logs were scattered along the ridge above, as if someone had been moving them. Most disturbingly, footprints, several sets, were discovered leading directly to the ledge from which the log had fallen. The evidence pointed not to misfortune, but to malice.
Investigators are searching for answers as to what exactly happened to her.
At this point, this is an ongoing investigation. It is developing. We are gathering information. I will say at this point, that is a section of tree that had struck the victim.
An investigation was launched immediately. Rangers with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources reached out to the Hocking County Sheriff's Office. Word spread quickly. Was this truly an accident? Or had someone, perhaps even deliberately, caused Victoria's death?
The students and other people nearby called 911, but her injuries were far too severe.
And now authorities say this most recent one may not have been an accident.
2 or 3 people may be responsible for her death.
Days later, a tip came in from a local mother. Her daughter had received a text message from a friend, one of those vague, alarming teenage confessions that begged to be decoded. The message read, "I did something serious at the park today with someone else."
She has a message on her phone. I don't know if she deleted it now that she's told me or not, but of him saying that there's something serious happened. It was right after apparently the incident at the park, that something serious happened at the park and that he needs to talk to her, but he can't send it over text.
That was enough to get detectives moving. Through interviews and digital forensics, they traced the message back to 2 names, Jordan Buckley and Jaden Church-Heus, both 16th, both students, both at the park that day. Detectives brought in Jordan for questioning first. The footage from that interview would later become a chilling insight into teenage impulsiveness and fear. Jordan slumped in his chair, mumbling answers, visibly shaken. At first, he denied everything. He hadn't done anything. He was just there, just walking around. But the truth, piece by piece, began to claw its way out. He had been there, yes. So had Jaden. They had gone hiking, bored and restless. They had climbed, explored, and at some point found themselves standing near a stack of old logs. According to Jordan's eventual confession, it was Jaden who kicked the log, perhaps in jest, perhaps in thoughtless mischief.
Were you a part of it, Jordan? I didn't push it off, but I moved the log with him. I pulled it out. I didn't know he was going to kick it off, though. A woman lost her life and you knew it.
The log had tumbled off the cliffside, vanishing over the edge. They hadn't checked to see where it landed. They hadn't told anyone. Instead, they ran. As Jordan's story unfolded, a picture emerged. Not of cold-blooded killers, but of teenagers who played with the wrong object in the wrong place at the wrong time, and whose decision ended a life. Still, was it truly ignorance or negligence? And did it matter? Victoria Schaefer's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a turning point for a community. What began as a peaceful morning in the woods turned into a murder investigation. Families were torn apart, careers destroyed, and childhood innocence shattered. 2 boys faced the full weight of adult consequences, and 1 woman, a mother, a professional, a daughter, was gone forever. What happened next would test the limits of the justice system, challenge the town's sense of safety, and force everyone to ask, when does a mistake become a crime? The forest was still echoing with questions when investigators declared the scene a possible homicide. It wasn't just the odd angle of the log or the clean edges that unsettled them. It was the unmistakable signs of human interference. The prints in the dirt, the scuffs on the rock, and the position of the log too far from any tree it could have naturally fallen from. Someone had moved it. Someone had pushed it, or worse, thrown it. This was no accident. This was a crime. At the core of the investigation were 2 boys, 16 years old, who'd gone hiking that day, Jordan Buckley and Jaden Church-Heus. At first glance, they were like any others, restless teens wandering the woods looking for distraction. But beneath the surface, something far darker had unraveled. A moment of recklessness, perhaps, or a decision made without the understanding of consequence. Still, a life had ended, and someone had to be held accountable. When detectives questioned Jordan, his guilt wasn't obvious. He fumbled, he contradicted himself, and he hesitated. Typical signs of a scared teenager in over his head. But the story he told slowly began to take shape. He and Jaden had been climbing along the upper ridge near Old Man's Cave when they came across a stack of logs. They were bored. They were fooling around. According to Jordan, Jaden began kicking at one of the logs, a massive 6-foot timber lying dangerously close to the cliff's edge.
So I touched the log to move it out of the area. But I hit to move it out of the area. To move it, it was right in between these trees, and he pushed it out. And then I helped him push it out, but he kicked it down. I didn't kick it. So I did touch the log. So you helped him? No, I didn't know he was going to kick it off. But I helped him pull it out, yeah.
And he said nothing when Victoria Schaefer was struck. What makes this crime so difficult to comprehend isn't just its brutality, it's how senseless it was. The boys didn't know Victoria. They weren't targeting her. They didn't mean to kill anyone, at least not in the cold-blooded way most people associate with murder. But their actions, thoughtless, dangerous, and entirely avoidable, resulted in a death all the same. That's where the law steps in. Intentional or not, the death of a person caused by the deliberate act of another is a crime. The authorities had to determine, was this manslaughter, negligence, murder? And how does justice weigh against youth? As the investigation continued, the full extent of the day unraveled. Witnesses placed the boys at the scene.
We were walking up the metal steps and a really loud, crack sound occurred. And we all just turned around and she was down.
That she's just not here, and I feel worse for her family, especially her younger daughters.
We bonded a lot. We had a lot of things that we had in common and that we talked about.
She was basically like family, because she cared about every single one of us.
Everybody needs to know that there's consequences for their actions.
I had to call because I was the only one with the phone.
Phone records confirmed their presence. A text message, sent in a moment of guilt, proved to be the first crack in a pact of silence. And when Jordan finally admitted that they ran from the scene instead of seeking help, the question wasn't whether they were involved. It was how responsible each of them was. Jaden, when questioned, reportedly said little. The bond between the boys began to fracture under the pressure of mounting evidence. Jordan, scared and remorseful, confessed further, drawing diagrams describing where they stood, how the log fell, and even pointing out where it bounced off the rocks before hitting Victoria. He swore he hadn't pushed it. He begged to take a polygraph. He cried. But his involvement was now etched in every word he had spoken. In cases like these, the weight of guilt isn't always measured by the blood on someone's hands. It's measured by the silence that followed, by the choice to run, to hide, to pretend that nothing happened. Jordan's fear might have been understandable, but it couldn't undo the loss. And Jaden's alleged role was quickly coming under deeper scrutiny. The prosecution had to consider their age. They were minors. But this wasn't shoplifting or vandalism. A woman was dead, and the community was watching closely. The question on everyone's lips wasn't just, how could this happen? But what now? For Victoria's family, no sentence could return her. No justice would truly balance the scales. Her husband, her children, and her clients would live every day with a hole in their lives that two boys, in a single senseless act, had created. The crime was now public. Headlines screamed of log killers and deadly prank. But for those who were there, for the ones who heard the scream of the forest fall silent, it was never just a headline. It was a tragedy written in bark, blood, and unbearable stillness. And it had only just begun. The courtroom was silent, heavy with the kind of tension that settles when tragedy meets justice. The community of Logan, Ohio, had waited months for this moment. For some, it was closure. For others, it was confrontation. And for the families involved, especially that of Victoria Schaefer, it was a reckoning. Jordan Buckley and Jaden Churchhiss were both 16 years old when they were charged. The prosecution debated whether to try them as adults. The charge, reckless homicide, a second-degree felony. Not murder, but a crime rooted in the undeniable consequence of reckless behavior. It wasn't premeditated, it wasn't personal, but it had ended a life and the justice system had to respond. Both teens initially denied full responsibility. Their stories conflicted, shifted, pointed fingers. But as evidence mounted, Jordan's interview, witness testimony, and the location of the log, there was no escaping the truth. The boys had dislodged the log that killed Victoria. Whether kicked or thrown, whether out of mischief or malice, the act had happened, and they had run. Jordan, who had spoken most during the investigation, now stood quieter. At times he seemed lost, just a boy beneath the courtroom lights, overwhelmed. Jaden remained more guarded, stoic in his seat. The two were no longer side by side. A shared secret had splintered into shared consequence. Victoria's family watched from the gallery, often clutching tissues, bracing against each replayed detail. Her husband gave a statement that brought the room to tears. Victoria was light, he said, and that light was stolen by a careless moment and a silent retreat. We are left in darkness. The defense leaned heavily on the boys' age, their immaturity, their lack of criminal history. They were, in the eyes of the law, still children. But the prosecution reminded the jury that recklessness doesn't excuse responsibility, that someone who picks up a weapon, however unknowingly, still bears the weight of its impact. This isn't about bad kids, the prosecutor said. It's about a bad decision, one that took a life. Plea deals were eventually offered, partially to spare Victoria's family the pain of a prolonged trial. Both boys accepted them. Jordan and Jaden pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Each was sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile detention facility with the possibility of release before age 21 if rehabilitation was evident. To some, the sentence felt like justice. To others, it felt painfully inadequate. The judge spoke carefully as he delivered the ruling. "This is not a celebration of punishment," he said. "It is a lesson in consequence. For the defendants, this is not the end of your story, but it must be the beginning of accountability." The gavel struck. The courtroom emptied, but the echoes would last much longer. In the months following the trial, Logan tried to return to normal. But how does a community forget a tragedy that unfolded beneath its beloved trees? Hocking Hills remained open, but something intangible had shifted. Visitors walked the trails more carefully. Rangers watched the cliffs more closely. And the memory of that day, the snap, the scream, the silence, hung in the air like mist that refused to lift. Victoria Schaefer's family struggled to move forward. Her children, still grappling with her absence, often returned to the places she loved, leaving flowers and notes where she used to set her tripod. Her husband in interviews described grief not as a process, but as a storm, sometimes calm, often violent, always there. Yet through it all, he made one thing clear: "I forgive, but I won't forget."
She told me something she never told me before. She said the happiest part of her day was at the end of the night when she was in my arms. She told me she loved me and couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with me. I loved her more at that moment than ever before. And the next night she was gone.
The two boys, once inseparable friends, now live very different lives. Inside juvenile detention, rehabilitation programs focused on counseling, education, and understanding the weight of their choices. Jordan, by most reports, showed signs of remorse early on. He wrote letters, one to Victoria's family, one to his own mother, and one to the judge. In each he said, "I didn't know what we did would do this, but I know now, and I carry it every day." Jaden was quieter, more distant. Some said he struggled to engage. Others believed the weight of guilt made it hard to speak. Whether either of them would ever fully comprehend what they'd done or who they had taken was a question that could only be answered with time. Public reaction remained mixed. Some saw the boys as reckless teens who needed guidance, not cages. Others viewed the light sentence as an insult to Victoria's memory. Online forums lit up with debates about justice, privilege, and the legal age of accountability. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion. Few had answers. What did remain, however, was the impact. Schools introduced more programs on responsible behavior and empathy. Park signage was updated, emphasizing safety and stewardship. Local media revisited the story yearly, not to sensationalize, but to remind, to remember. Victoria Schaefer's photography studio was eventually closed, but her work lived on. Her images, capturing moments of joy, nature, and human connection, became part of memorial displays. Her legacy was not her death, but the light she left behind. And for the two boys, the story was far from over. When their sentences ended, when the doors opened and they stepped back into a world that would never look the same, they would carry more than a record. They would carry a story, a tragic one, a cautionary one, and one that they had helped write with a single, fatal choice. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with echoes of what was lost, of what could have been prevented, of lives forever changed by a moment that should have been just another afternoon. Victoria Schaefer went to Hocking Hills that day to create memories for others. She never expected her own life would become the centerpiece of a cautionary tale, a tragedy etched not just in court records, but in the hearts of a grieving family and an entire community. Her death was not the result of a long-held grudge or a crime of passion. It was the outcome of a reckless impulse, a thoughtless act that crossed a line between play and peril. The boys who caused it didn't intend to kill, but intention doesn't resurrect the dead. This case is a reminder that the smallest actions can have irreversible consequences, that youth is not immunity, silence is not safety, that one careless moment can tear through time like a blade, cutting futures short before they've had a chance to unfold. But it also reminds us of something else, something harder to define, the fragility of forgiveness, the strength it takes to grieve with grace, and the possibility of growth even in the shadow of pain. For the Schaefer family, the sentence didn't bring back Victoria, but they chose to live forward, to honor her with love instead of vengeance. And that in itself is powerful. For Jordan and Jaden, their lives now hold a second chapter, one shaped by the weight of what they've done, but not yet written. Whether they carry that weight as a burden or as a responsibility remains to be seen. And for us, the viewers, the listeners, the distant observers, we are left with the story, not to forget, not to fear, but to remember, to teach, and maybe to choose more wisely when it's our turn to decide what comes next. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, taught you something, or left you thinking, please like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that matter. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to life. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Comment below with your thoughts or questions. We read everyone. Stay safe, stay aware, and take care of each other.
They said it was like 15 gunshots.
It was like back to back. Yeah, he was like boom, 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 you could tell that. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. You could tell when nobody shooting back. You could tell it was like one sound.
It began on a chilly afternoon in Cleveland, the kind of day when the city's east side feels strangely quiet, almost expectant. But no one could have anticipated the horror about to unfold on November 5th, 2023, a day that would leave an entire community haunted and a mother clutching nothing but memories. At the heart of this tragedy was a boy, just 14 years old, whose dreams, laughter, and very future were stolen in the blink of an eye.
This is a lost soul. Like, ain't no way. This is a lost soul. Ain't no way. This why I don't watch this. I can't stand it. Hello? Before that, I'm recording them because this gonna be known.
Ma'am.
Hello?
Ma'am.
Yes, hello.
What is the address of the police? Would you need the police?
I mean, I'm on 93rd and Admin.
93rd and Admin?
It's a body in the middle of the street. I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's bleeding from the head. It looks like a female.
Braylon Harges wasn't a troublemaker or a face the neighbors feared. He was a typical teenager, balancing school, friends, and family with the usual dreams of something bigger.
Braylon was the life of the party, honey. He had that smile when he walked in the room. You just had to get to know him. He loved football, he loved to dance, loved to sing.
Yet that ordinary innocence, the very idea of safety, was about to be shattered in the most unthinkable way. And the person who would destroy it all? Someone he called a friend. It was barely past 3 when Braylon and 16-year-old Steven Sopko, his companion, his so-called buddy, were seen walking down East 90th Street. To anyone glancing out their windows or passing by, the two looked like any other pair of teens, maybe talking about school, music, or girlfriends. But beneath that ordinary exterior, a chilling plot was already in motion, a secret that would soon be laid bare for the world to see. He told Braylon to walk ahead. It was such a simple request, innocuous, even friendly. But as Braylon took those final steps, everything unraveled in an instant. Sopko pulled a gun from his waistband, and before Braylon could even turn around, he was shot. Once, twice, 13 times in the back. The violence was swift, methodical, and utterly merciless. As Braylon collapsed to the pavement, bleeding and gasping for breath, Sopko didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, fired again, and then calmly walked away.
Did you guys see anything or just hear anything?
I just saw. And it was a red car with some guys in it, but they rode right past me.
Okay.
So that's all I saw.
Which way did they go?
That way.
You said it was a red car and
Yeah.
they went that way
That
towards
way.
90th and Harkness?
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of red car?
Because I was so in shock.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you know who was in the vehicle?
It was just 2 boys in the car, and they wouldn't even stop to talk to me. So I asked them to call the police, they just kept on.
Leaving his so-called friend dying alone on a cold city street. The entire attack was captured on a nearby surveillance camera, a silent witness to a betrayal so deep, it's hard to comprehend. Word of the shooting spread quickly. Sirens pierced the air, neighbors gathered in shocked clusters, and police officers arrived to a scene of horror, one that even seasoned detectives struggled to process. The footage left no doubt. This was no accident, no tragic misunderstanding. It was a calculated execution, carried out with chilling precision. But the suspense didn't end there.
They said it was like 15 gunshots.
Like back to back. I'm still waiting. I'm looking for down there and
You
I'm
have your
hurt.
ID on you? Just so I can have that information.
I said, I can't believe people can do stuff like that. I just don't understand.
When investigators dug into the digital trail between Braylon and Sopko, what they found only deepened the mystery. There were no threats, no angry messages, no indication that a deadly conflict was brewing. Their conversations were eerily normal, marked by an absence of drama or hate. It was as if the violence had come from nowhere, a cold silence masking intentions that still, to this day, remain unexplained.
Car took off. You heard about 15 shots?
I didn't hear no shots.
You didn't hear no
I
shots?
didn't hear no shots. They heard the shots. When I came, he was just there.
On the ground, laying in the middle?
Yeah, I kind of knew what it was. I was like,
Okay.
oh, is that a bomb?
And did you say anything to those guys?
No. Oh, yeah, I said, can you call the police? They just kept going.
They just took off on a high rate of speed?
Not a high rate, they just kept going.
Took off, okay.
As Braylon's family grappled with unimaginable grief,
Neighbor had called me and said my son probably got shot on the one-way. I don't stay in the neighborhood no more.
Okay.
We jump in the car, we drive over here, we see y'all, we run up.
stay with us as we unravel the layers of a case that still sends chills down Cleveland's spine. To understand the tragedy that took Braylon Harge's life, you have to step into the heartbeat of Cleveland's East Side, a place as tough as it is proud, where neighborhoods are stitched together by history, hardship, and hope. Braylon Harge's was a product of this world, a world that shaped him, loved him, and ultimately mourned him. At home, Braylon was the glue that held things together. He'd help his mother with groceries, tease his siblings, and stay up late playing video games with friends online. He idolized NBA stars and dreamed of one day making it big, maybe buying his mom a house in a better part of town. But life on the East Side was never simple. The community carried scars of lost jobs, of family members taken by violence or drugs, of opportunities that always seemed just out of reach. Still, there was resilience. Braylon's mother worked hard, sometimes holding down 2 jobs, determined to give her kids a future beyond the boundaries of their zip code. She was his rock, and he was her hope, a bond that no hardship could break. In this close-knit community, friendships meant everything. That's what made Braylon's relationship with Stephen Supko so significant, and, in the end, so tragic. Stephen was 2 years older, a boy with his own troubles, but to Braylon, he was a trusted companion. The two spent hours together, playing basketball at the local park, sharing secrets, making each other laugh. Neighbors saw them as brothers, and even Braylon's mother believed Stephen was a good influence, a friend who would look out for her son. But even in the safest friendships, darkness can sometimes take root unnoticed. November 5th, 2023. What should have been just another ordinary Sunday. Braylon and Stephen Supko moved through the neighborhood side by side, sneakers crunching leaves on the sidewalk, laughter echoing between rows of weathered houses. Unbeknownst to Braylon, fate was stalking him in plain sight. They just left the house of Supko's girlfriend, a familiar pit stop, and turned onto East 90th Street. The sun was dipping low, shadows stretching, the light growing colder. Nothing about the way Stephen acted betrayed what was to come. There was no argument, no warning sign, no desperate last words to suggest the horror about to unfold. What surveillance cameras caught next is as chilling as anything a crime scene could ever record. As the two walked, Stephen fell behind just a step, his eyes flicking to the side as if scanning for witnesses. Then, so quietly it might have seemed innocent, he told Braylon to walk ahead. Maybe he said he wanted to tie his shoe or needed a moment to check his phone. For Braylon, there was no reason to hesitate. He trusted Stephen, just like always. But what Braylon didn't know was that in that split second, the bond between them was already shattered. With the cold calm of someone who had made up his mind long before, Stephen Supko drew a gun from his waistband. In the space of a heartbeat, everything changed. Without a word, he raised the weapon and opened fire. The shots rang out in a staccato burst. 1, 2, 3, 13 in total. Each one driving Braylon further from the world of the living. He never saw it coming. Not one plea for mercy, not one chance to run. Braylon collapsed on the pavement, his young body racked with pain and confusion. But Stephen wasn't finished. He stepped closer and fired again, making sure the deed was done before calmly turning away. There was no panic, no remorse, just the chilling image of a teenager walking from the scene of an ambush as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Within minutes, sirens split the air. The first officers to arrive found a scene so brutal that even the most hardened detectives were left shaken. Body cam footage would later reveal a moment of stunned silence as the police processed what they saw. A 14-year-old child, riddled with bullets, his life extinguished on a neighborhood street. The sense of shock rippled outwards, from the officers to the neighbors who peered from behind curtains.
See anything or just hear anything?
I just saw, and it was a red car with some guys in it, but they rode right past me.
Okay.
So that's all I saw.
Which way did they go?
That way.
You said it was a red car?
Yeah.
And they went that way
That
towards
way.
90th and Harkness?
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of red car?
Because I was so in shock.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you know who was in the vehicle?
It's just two boys in the car, and they wouldn't even stop to talk to me. So I asked them to call the police, they just kept going. But I don't know who did it. You know
don't know make or model or anything like that? Okay.
He was just laying there. That's all. I almost hit him.
Speaking with somebody on scene, they said they seen a red vehicle take off from this location going towards 90th and Harkness. Unknown make or model. They seen
They said it was like 15 gunshots.
It was like back to back. I live way. I live on there and I
you have your
heard.
ID on you, just so I can have that information.
I said, I can't believe people can do stuff like that. I just don't understand.
I just took off. You heard about 15 shots?
I didn't hear no shots.
You didn't hear no
shots? I didn't hear no shots. They heard the shots. When I came, he was just there.
On the ground, laying in the middle?
I kind of knew what it was. I was like,
okay.
Is that a bomb?
And did you say anything to those guys?
No. Oh, yeah. I said, can you call the police? They just kept going.
They just took off on a high rate of speed?
Not a high rate. They just kept going.
Took off? Okay.
They could have been just driving by. I don't know, you know.
What she said? She said that when she seen the person on the ground, she seen two people in a red vehicle, car. She asked, "Can they call the police?" And when she said that, they took off going northbound, 90 towards Harkness. They just heard 15 shots roughly. 15 shots. I didn't get any info, but they said all three. They just heard about
that amount of shots. Yeah, he like boom, 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 you could tell that. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. You could tell when nobody shooting back. You could tell just like one sound. We would sit right down in our car talking, and we just heard it.
To the mother who would soon receive a call that every parent dreads. As police secured the scene and began their frantic search for answers,
They had called me and said my son probably got shot on the one-way. I don't stay in the neighborhood no more.
Okay.
We jump in the car, we drive over here, we see y'all, we run up.
And what is description?
5'6".
5'6".
Light skin. I just took that, I think they're like 205 now.
Wait, 205?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me just give me a couple minutes, okay?
Oh, she just called me through social media and said that your son probably got shot.
Well, she didn't give you any reason why she thought it could be.
Baby, I didn't even give her a reason to even get to that far. I just jumped.
Yeah.
You see, I got a nightgown.
You're okay. No, do you have your ID on you, ma'am? That's, you said your son, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we don't know anything yet, so I'm not gonna tell you anything. So.
No.
Going up.
they were met with a wall of confusion. How could two friends end up here? One dead, the other gone. Investigators pored over surveillance tapes and digital trails. The footage was damning. Stephen, once Braylon's confidant, now the cold-blooded executioner. But when detectives combed through their phones and social media, what they found was even more disturbing. There was no argument, no falling out, no text or online spat to point to a motive. The silence was as chilling as the violence itself. Back at home, Sierra LaFleur's world was shattering. The police delivered the news with as much care as they could muster, but nothing could soften the blow. Her baby was gone, taken not by a stranger, but by someone she'd welcomed into her life, someone she trusted. As the city reeled, word of the murder spread like wildfire. News trucks arrived, neighbors grieved in the stunned disbelief, and the question hung in the air like a thick, unyielding fog. Why? Why would Stephen Sopko, barely out of childhood himself, ambush a friend he'd known for years? Was it jealousy, peer pressure, something darker that no one had seen? The community demanded answers, but in those first hours there was only grief, fear, and an overwhelming sense that innocence itself had been murdered on East 90th Street. Braylon's death wasn't just a loss, it was a rupture, an earthquake that would shake Cleveland's foundation to its core. The city's search for answers and for justice was only just beginning. Justice in America is not swift, and for the family of Braylon Harges, each day that passed after his murder felt like an eternity. Stephen Sopko, just 16 at the time of the crime, vanished after the shooting, slipping through the cracks and forcing Braylon's family to live not just with their grief, but with the ache of unanswered questions. For weeks, his whereabouts remained a mystery. Rumors swirled. Stephen was hiding with relatives. He'd fled the city, maybe even left the state. It was as if the earth had swallowed him up. It wasn't until January 2024, months after Braylon's life was stolen, that justice finally caught up. Acting on a tip, U.S. Marshals surrounded a modest apartment on the city's outskirts. Stephen was found inside, unarmed, exhausted, and with the cold resignation of someone who knew he'd run out of places to hide. The community's collective breath, held in anxious anticipation, was finally released. The accused was now in custody, but the hardest part was still to come. For Braylon's family, the prospect of a trial brought a complicated blend of relief and dread. Would they ever truly know why Stephen did it? Would they get answers? Or would the trial be just another exercise in legal formality? A system doing its best to address the unthinkable? The case quickly drew the attention of prosecutors and the press. The crime's brutality, combined with the youth of both victim and perpetrator, made headlines across Cleveland and beyond. The question loomed: would Stephen be tried as a juvenile or face adult charges? The prosecution wasted no time making their case. The surveillance footage was damning, the evidence overwhelming, and the horror of a child ambushed by his friend left little room for mercy. The judge, citing the calculated nature of the crime and its devastating impact on the community, ruled that Stephen Sopko would be tried as an adult. As the trial began, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric, a simmering blend of heartbreak, anger, and curiosity. Reporters packed the gallery, local activists and clergy came to witness justice in action, and Braylon's family gathered, bracing themselves for what they were about to hear. Testimony after testimony painted a picture that was as heartbreaking as it was clear. There had been no fight, no struggle, no moment of rage. It was premeditated, cold, executed with intent. Prosecutors played the surveillance footage, freezing the frame on the moment Braylon turned his back on his friend for the last time. Some in the courtroom looked away, others openly wept.
When we get to the sentencing on an aggravated murder, in this case, Your Honor, you saw the video, you saw the evidence. I don't need to play the video again to tell you what happened. 13 shots in the back of a 14-year-old. You don't need to see that again. You know in your heart what he was doing that day.
The texts and social media posts between the boys, entered into evidence, only deepened the mystery. There was no trace of anger, no clue as to why Stephen would turn on Braylon so violently. The silence before the storm was deafening. Stephen himself sat quietly, his expression unreadable. Sometimes he looked at his hands. Sometimes he watched Braylon's mother with haunted eyes. When his defense team addressed the jury, they spoke of his troubled upbringing, the pressure he'd faced, and possible mental health struggles. But nothing they said could erase the image of what he'd done.
Mr. Sopko, 16 years old, at the time of this murder. You saw a lot of his Instagram, a lot of the videos. This is a young man that had a lot of problems and a lot of a misview of the world that involved firearms and involved being in the streets. And it's unfortunate that it wasn't reined in, or it wasn't some kind of intervention before he got so deep into that lifestyle that we have over here for today, occurring. Mr. Sopko did not grow up to where he is now, 17 years of age, unloved. He had a loving mother, he has a loving mother, he's got a loving stepfather, he had all these people behind me who were in this trial the entire time and who are here today. I provided the court letters from a few people in the community that knew Stephen in another time. He had a job. I don't think that is a terribly large mitigation in this situation, but it shows that he did have some ability that he threw away. He's going to appeal the conviction, Your Honor, I'll say that, and I'm going to instruct him to remain silent here. But I would ask the court to consider, as part of your formulating a sentence, that he was 16 years old at the time. He's turned 17 during the last 10 months or so that he's been in prison. That if the court adopts the recommended sentencing from our brief, he will be in his 40s by the time he's released. I think with the support he has, with the ability to be employed and the ability to grow, who knows where he will be then. I'm hoping he will go the way of improving himself, getting some kind of vocational skills, being able to come out of the prison system and be able to salvage the second half of his life in a way that's productive and a productive part of the community and not somebody who is a threat to the community.
The jury deliberated for only a few hours. On October 31st, 2024, the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. Aggravated murder, felonious assault, weapons charges. The weight of the words settled on the courtroom like a stone.
Mr. Sapko, is there anything you want to say?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. I think the parties stipulate the defendant was found guilty by the jury of all 5 counts as indicted. The court then is going to sentence you to the firearm specification, 6 years, mandatory time served prior to and consecutive to 25 years for a total of 31 years. So your sentence will be life with consideration for parole after 31 years.
For Braylon's mother, it was a moment of vindication, but not of victory. Nothing could bring her son back. Sentencing followed swiftly. The judge, voice steady but thick with emotion, condemned Stephen Sopko to 31 years to life in prison. As the sentence was handed down, Sarah LaFleur stood up, clutching the urn that held her son's ashes. "This is all I have left of my baby," she whispered, her words echoing in a courtroom suddenly silent.
Sarah LaFleur, I'm Brad Hodges' mother. I just want to say thank you, Judge. Thank you. I want to say thank you to the prosecutors and the detectives and everybody for bringing me justice for my baby. It was a long journey, very long, and I'm still healing. But I brought Braylon with me today to thank you.
It was a reminder that justice, no matter how severe, could never restore what was lost. For Braylon, the only true justice would have been another chance at life, a chance taken far too soon. The verdict did not close the wounds. In the days and weeks that followed, Cleveland's East Side struggled to return to normal, as if the murder of Braylon Hodges had pulled back a curtain and exposed all the pain the community worked so hard to hide. Schools held moments of silence. Neighbors tied balloons and stuffed animals to lampposts near the crime scene. For Sarah LaFleur and her family, every sunrise was another reminder that their world would never be the same.
As a dog, I can't see it no other way, because I fear if he get back out on the streets, we slap him on the wrist and he get back out on the streets, what can he do to the next person? This is not a video game, this is real life.
But in the wake of tragedy, something else began to take root. A call for change, a hunger for answers, a refusal to let Braylon's name be swallowed up by the next news cycle.
One Cleveland mom is looking to start a new nonprofit to support the youth. I'm Keely Olivas. She's hoping with this new initiative she can save lives while also honoring the 14-year-old son she lost a year ago.
His mother became a voice for every parent who had lost a child to violence. She spoke at city council meetings, gave interviews to local news, and began planning a nonprofit in her son's honor.
Keep my son's memory alive by opening up a nonprofit organization to help kids and be aware of gun violence, just for the youth only.
One dedicated to helping children navigate the dangers of their environment, offering mentorship, support, and a safe place to dream beyond the boundaries of their neighborhood.
Thinking probably like a drop-in center where they could probably sit in group sections and just talk about what's going on, because I feel like a lot of kids don't have that outside of their parents and their household.
The case made headlines across Ohio and the nation. People asked, how could a friendship between two kids end in such brutality? What had gone so wrong? Experts debated whether the tragedy could have been prevented, if teachers, neighbors, or social services had seen the warning signs, if someone had reached Stephen before he crossed the line. But those questions, however urgent, could not change what had happened. For Braylon's friends, the loss was unfathomable. Some stopped going outside, afraid to trust. Others wrote his name in marker on their sneakers or posted tributes on social media, trying to make sense of their grief. The memory of that afternoon, of laughter turning to gunfire, hung over them like a shadow. For Sierra, the pain was raw and unrelenting. Her home felt emptier. Nights stretched on without the sound of Braylon's voice, without the small, everyday moments that once defined her world. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, the community rallied. Candlelight vigils lit up city parks. Churches opened their doors for prayer and reflection. Neighbors who had barely spoken in years reached out, bringing food, sharing memories, and promising to keep Braylon's story alive. He was more than what happened to him, one teacher said at a memorial. He was light, he was hope, and we owe it to him not to let that light go out. The trial also sparked uncomfortable conversations about youth, violence, and the failures of the system. How could a 16-year-old acquire a gun so easily? Why do some neighborhoods seem so vulnerable to tragedy? And what could be done to stop it from happening again? Policymakers, activists, and city leaders debated reforms, more resources for mental health, more support for struggling families, tougher gun laws, but meaningful change would take time. Meanwhile, Stephen Sopko began his long sentence in a world far removed from the one he'd known. Whatever the motive for his crime, he would have decades to reflect on the life he'd taken and the life he'd thrown away. The community, too, was left with questions that might never be answered. Questions about forgiveness, about the nature of evil, and about whether healing was possible after such a devastating loss. As the months passed, the shock faded, but the ache remained. Every birthday, every holiday, every empty chair at the dinner table was a reminder of what had been stolen. But slowly, steadily, Sierra and her supporters turned grief into purpose. The nonprofit launched in Braylon's name began to attract attention, providing hope and guidance to other kids facing impossible choices. His story became a rallying cry, not just a cautionary tale, but a call to action. And so, the legacy of Braylon Harges endures, not only in the pain of his absence, but in the promise that his memory will be a force for good, a beacon guiding others away from the darkness that claimed him. The city remembers, and in remembering, finds the strength to keep moving forward. The story of Braylon Harges is not just a single, senseless tragedy. It's a stark reflection of how quickly life can change, and how deeply violence ripples through a community. What happened on that November afternoon was more than the loss of a young boy's future. It was a betrayal of trust, a shattering of innocence, and a wound that will ache for years to come. Yet in the face of unimaginable loss, Braylon's family and community refused to let his memory fade into just another statistic. Sierra LaFleur, Braylon's mother, transformed her pain into purpose, reaching out to other families, launching a nonprofit, and demanding accountability from a system that too often fails its most vulnerable. Through her voice and through every candle lit at a vigil, Braylon's spirit continues to inspire action and hope. This case forces us to confront difficult questions. What leads a teenager to commit the unthinkable? How can friends become strangers in an instant? And most importantly, what can each of us do to prevent another life from being stolen in the same way? There are no simple answers, but the search for justice and for healing remains as urgent as ever. As we remember Braylon, we remember every child lost to violence, every parent left to pick up the pieces, and every community left to mourn. Their stories matter, their lives matter, and with every act of remembrance, every effort to create change, we honor them and keep their legacy alive. If this story moved you or made you think, please help us spread awareness. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that shine a light on the voices that need to be heard. Your support not only helps us keep these stories alive, but also brings us one step closer to a world where no parent ever has to say, "This is all I have left of my baby." Thank you for watching.
Come here, let me see your hands. Come here. You on the ground. On the ground. All right. We'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out. We can't figure it out. He's dead. Scoot over. He's dead. What is that?
Started swinging the bat. I knocked him to the ground with a knife and just tried to slit his throat because I didn't want him to feel any more pain.
It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in the quiet suburb of Solon, Ohio. A calm, uneventful neighborhood, the kind where families wave to one another from across their driveways, where porch lights flicker on in perfect synchronization each evening, and where violent crime seems almost unthinkable. But on November 21st, 2023, that illusion of suburban peace was shattered in the most unthinkable way. Theodore Gulia was known as a hardworking, soft-spoken man, a father, a husband, a neighbor. He spent most of his time at home, usually tucked away at his desk, clicking away at his computer or scribbling in notebooks, his life seemingly as quiet as the town he lived in. But behind the closed doors of the Gulia household, tensions had been simmering for years, ready to erupt like a volcano. Just before sunrise, a frantic 911 call pierced the silence. On the other end of the line was Theodore's wife, her voice trembling, her words barely coherent. "My husband, he's not breathing. There's so much blood." Officers were dispatched immediately, expecting the worst.
Come here, let me see your hands. Come here. What's going on? Get on the ground. Get on the ground, both of you on the ground.
But what they walked into was something that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. The scene inside the home was brutal. Blood painted the hallway. Furniture was overturned. Theodore's lifeless body lay twisted in a pool of crimson, his face nearly unrecognizable. The sheer savagery of the attack stunned even the most seasoned detectives. Initially, it looked like a robbery gone wrong, a break-in, a home invasion. But that theory crumbled as soon as the investigation began. Nothing had been stolen. There was no sign of forced entry. And perhaps most chilling of all, everyone who had access to the house was accounted for, except for one person. R.J. Gulia, Theodore's own son, was found at the scene. Calm, quiet, composed, too composed. As officers tried to make sense of the carnage, R.J.'s eerie stillness felt like a red flag they couldn't ignore. His story was confusing.
Who was here last night in the house? Just you and your dad?
Yeah, and I think someone broke in and murdered her.
Filled with contradictions and vague claims. He said he heard a noise, that someone must have broken in, that he had nothing to do with it. But something wasn't right. Detectives noticed his lack of emotion, his robotic answers, his unshaken posture in the face of death. Meanwhile, his brother Ben, who had just arrived at the scene, was inconsolable. His cries of anguish loud enough to echo through the neighborhood.
Okay, here, just roll over for me, buddy. Listen, we'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out.
I can't figure it out.
He's
dead.
Scoot over.
He's fucking dead.
What is this?
This is my wallet and my headphones. Can I?
Okay. Just relax, man. He's scared.
And in a barely audible breath, Ben said something to the officers that made their blood run cold. "It was RJ. I know it was him." Was this just grief talking? Or had Ben just exposed the horrifying truth? As investigators dug deeper, the clues began to align. There had been previous police calls to the Gulia home, instances of domestic disturbances, heated arguments between father and son. RJ had a history. He had issues. But murder? Even for detectives who had seen it all, something about this case felt more sinister than most. Like they weren't just piecing together a crime. They were peeling back layers of a family torn apart by rage, resentment, and something darker no one had dared speak aloud. Hours later, inside an interrogation room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, RJ would finally open his mouth. And what came next would leave investigators speechless. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He didn't ask for a lawyer. Instead, he began to talk, slowly, calmly.
He was sitting down, and I was gonna hit him from behind because I didn't want to go too far.
Confession flowing from his lips like it had been sitting on the edge of his tongue for far too long.
Start swinging the bat, and I knocked him to the ground. And right there where all that blood was, struggling, I took a knife and just tried to stroke because I didn't want him to feel anymore.
Described everything in chilling detail. The bat, the strikes, the knife, how he watched his father suffer, how something inside him just clicked. What could drive a man to kill his own father in cold blood? Was it years of emotional torment, a sudden psychotic break, or something more terrifying, premeditated malice from someone the family never saw coming? This is the story of Theodore Gulia's final hours, of a family ripped apart by betrayal, and of a son whose love turned lethal. You are about to witness the full investigation, from body cam footage to confessions, from lies to forensic truth. Every moment captured, every secret exposed. Because in this case, justice wasn't just about finding out what happened, it was about discovering why. It began like any other chilly November morning in the quiet suburb of Solon, Ohio. The streets were lined with amber leaves, children were preparing for school, and families across town were settling into their daily routines. The Gulia residence, nestled in a modest cul-de-sac, gave no indication of the horror that had just taken place inside. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happens, until it does. Theodore Gulia, a 58-year-old father of two, was found brutally murdered in his own home. The scene was unlike anything the responding officers had expected. Blood soaked the hallway carpet. Furniture was splintered and overturned. There were signs of a struggle, but not the kind associated with a break-in. Nothing had been stolen. There were no broken windows or forced doors. Instead, what they found was something far more unsettling. A murder that appeared deeply personal. Theodore had been working at his desk when the attack began. He was struck from behind with a baseball bat, violently, repeatedly, until he collapsed. His assailant didn't stop there. In what investigators would later describe as overkill, Theodore was then stabbed in the neck multiple times, a final act of rage that left the room looking more like a war zone than a family living space. Whoever had done this wasn't just trying to kill, they were trying to obliterate. As news of the murder reached the rest of the family, emotions ran high. Theodore's wife returned home first and made the 911 call, screaming through sobs as she begged for someone to help her husband. Soon after, the couple's adult sons, RJ and Ben, arrived. One was inconsolable, falling to his knees in anguish. The other stood silent, too silent. That son was RJ. RJ Gulia was no stranger to law enforcement. Officers had been called to the home before, usually for domestic disturbances involving him and his father. The relationship was rocky, strained by years of conflict that had never truly resolved. Still, no one could have anticipated how far it would go. When questioned, RJ claimed he had heard noises in the night. He said he thought someone had broken in. He said he didn't know what happened, but his story was full of holes, and the more detectives listened, the more things didn't add up.
Yes, sir. What happened?
I heard scuffling in the middle of the night. I usually smoke cigarettes in the garage.
Okay.
I listen to music at a certain volume.
Okay.
Long story short, I found my dad when my mom comes home.
Okay. Who moved the body? Because the body's clearly been moved. Was that you?
I didn't move it. My mom. My mom may have went up there.
Your mom is not moving that body.
I'm saying. Are you saying?
Who was here last night in the house? Just you and your dad?
Yeah, and I think someone broke in.
Where was he
murdered.
at?
He just got.
Meanwhile, Ben, RJ's younger brother, offered a very different perspective. Shaken and tearful, he told officers something they weren't expecting to hear. He believed RJ had done it, not because of evidence, but because of a feeling. A gut instinct rooted in years of watching his brother struggle with anger, isolation, and resentment. It wasn't just grief speaking, it was suspicion. And it wasn't long before investigators started to share that feeling. Further digging uncovered an unsettling pattern. RJ had threatened violence before. He had outbursts, periods of calm followed by sudden rage. One officer recalled a previous visit to the Gulia house just weeks earlier. During a heated argument, RJ had allegedly threatened to hurt someone, possibly even his father. It seemed like the family had been living on a knife's edge for a long time, and now someone had finally snapped. When detectives brought RJ in for questioning, they expected resistance, maybe denial, maybe silence. But what they got was something far more disturbing, a confession. With an eerie calmness, RJ recounted everything. He described how he approached his father from behind while he was sitting at his desk.
There wasn't much motive other than just being angry. He was sitting down, and I was going to hit him from behind because I didn't want to go too far. I just wanted it to end fast. When I decided in my mind I was going to do it. I hit him a couple times in the arm, and it broke his arm. It hurt his arm. I didn't want him to just stagger off and call the police, and it was more of the same. I said, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And
How he struck him in the arm first, hesitating for just a moment before continuing. How, after realizing his father was still alive, he used a knife to end it quickly. He said he wasn't even angry. Not really. He just wanted it to stop. Wanted everything to stop.
he was struggling. I took a knife and just tried to destroy it because I didn't want him to feel any more pain. And I had gone too far. And I don't know how I didn't take my life, seeing my dad like that, for no freaking reason, man. I didn't have much motive or plan, and I wasn't even that angry. It's just, I don't know, like I was possessed. He was literally sitting down, and I started to strike him.
Sitting down where, though?
At his desk. He sat there a lot of the time, and I went up to behind, and I started hitting him, and he said, "I love you, man."
The interview left seasoned officers shaken. This wasn't just a murder, it was a breakdown, a quiet unraveling that had been building for years. And yet, despite the brutality, RJ expressed sorrow, remorse. He claimed he loved his father, that he didn't know what came over him.
I loved my dad the most. I tried the hardest to get along with him. He's a hard guy to get along with. I cared about him the most out of everybody. I just want you to know that.
I believe
that. Guitar. He loved playing guitar.
I believe that, RJ. I don't doubt that one bit.
That's what happened. I didn't do anything weird. I didn't take it too far. I just wanted it to end.
You know, we can't go back in time. The best we can do is go forward and make the best out of, from there on, what you can control. You can't control what has been done. It's done. Let's move past it. Let's make better choices. Let's do the right thing from here moving forward. And that speaks to you and it speaks to your character, and I appreciate that.
That he wished he could take it all back. But words don't bring back the dead. By the end of the investigation, RJ was charged and later pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to a maximum of 25 years behind bars. A tragic ending to a story that never should have reached this point. This is not just the story of a murder. It's the story of a family fractured from within, of a father lost, of a son consumed by something he couldn't explain, and of a community left asking the question that still echoes through the quiet streets of Solon. The final moments of Theodore Guglia's life were violent beyond comprehension. According to the confession given by his son RJ, the murder wasn't a chaotic outburst. It was methodical, planned at least in RJ's mind, even if not plotted out with detail. The disturbing truth is that the crime wasn't born out of a heated argument or an act of self-defense. It was something darker, colder, and far more difficult to rationalize. It happened late at night, in the quiet stillness of their family home. Theodore was in his study, sitting at his desk like he did every evening. A lamp glowed in the corner of the room, casting soft light across open folders and a steaming mug of tea that would soon go cold. That night was no different from any other, or so it seemed. RJ entered the room silently, a baseball bat gripped tightly in both hands. He says he didn't want his father to suffer, that he intended to make it quick. But what followed was anything but merciful. RJ stood behind his father for a long moment, watching him, breathing heavily. In his own words, something inside of him clicked. That was the word he used. The first blow was aimed at the arm, hesitant, perhaps, or simply a miscalculation. But after that, RJ says, there was no turning back. He began swinging the bat wildly, repeatedly, until Theodore collapsed. According to the medical examiner, the blunt force trauma was catastrophic. Bones shattered, skull fractured. Yet somehow, Theodore was still alive. It was then that RJ retrieved a knife. He says it came from his father's own desk. What followed was a frenzied stabbing to the throat. Deep, precise wounds meant to silence, to end. RJ later claimed that he didn't want him to suffer, but the crime scene suggested otherwise. Blood had splattered up the walls, across the desk, and into the hallway. The force and repetition of the attack told a different story, one driven not by pity but by rage. And then as suddenly as it began, it was over. RJ stood over his father's body, covered in blood, breathing heavily, alone. He didn't call for help. He didn't flee. Instead, he stayed in the house, slept there, in fact, mere feet from the mutilated corpse of the man who had raised him. He went about the night like nothing had happened. Hours passed. Morning came. It wasn't until his mother returned home around 10 a.m. that the alarm was raised. She screamed when she found her husband's body. Arjo, who had called her home under the pretense of needing cigarettes, said almost nothing. He let her find the body on her own. He didn't even warn her. When questioned later, he said he didn't know what to say.
Earlier that day, maybe he's talking to my mom about bringing over cigarettes or something.
Okay. When was the first time you spoke with any of them afterwards?
I told you that morning I called her, tried to get her over for cigarettes. She said, "Where's your father?" and went upstairs and saw the stuff on the wall and said, "Oh my goodness, I don't know." And I lied to her and said it wasn't me. She didn't believe it at all.
Okay.
Kind of shook me by my shoulder and went down.
Well, your mom loves you very much, and it's a tough, it's a terrible thing for anybody to go
She
to.
can say, "Just put a bowl in my head, sir." I'll back. I'm like those old days.
That he was afraid, but the damage was already done. Officers arrived quickly and immediately knew something was wrong. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a third party. Only RJ and Theodore had been in the home that night.
Yeah, we're in agreement.
I just got a quick timeline from her.
Okay.
She went to her daughter Claire's yesterday in the morning. Stayed with her daughter all yesterday, doing holiday stuff. Stayed at her daughter's last night. Came home at 10 o'clock this morning. I said, "Why'd you come home?" "Well, RJ called me and said he needed cigarettes."
Yeah.
I said, "Did he say anything happened?" "No."
So
I said, "Okay, so how did you find out when you got here?" She's like, "Well, I first came here, went to my back bedroom, and then I went upstairs, and that's what I found."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." And RJ, when you got here, RJ never said anything to you about what happened upstairs?
No, I briefly talked to RJ. I Mirandized him because he's in custody. I briefly Mirandized him. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Somebody broke in the house and murdered my dad." So, he clearly, I don't know where the gun is.
It's upstairs.
Is it?
I think we found one upstairs.
Well, that looks like a pellet gun.
Well, I just saw it when I didn't look at it.
Yeah, I saw that one up there. I don't think that's it. It might be.
And I guess
because I didn't touch it either.
She called this son.
Yeah, I don't
after
think
she found him.
I don't think he's related.
No, after she found him, that's when she called him, the younger son. So, as far as my understanding goes, whenever anything happened, it was just RJ and his dad.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing I've gotten from.
Who's the other guy?
Oh, that's the other brother.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so the same thing is that RJ and his dad were home alone all night.
Probably.
Yeah, that's the same thing I'm getting.
Yeah.
Good job, though.
The timeline didn't lie, and neither did the blood spatter, which clearly indicated the attack had occurred in the study, exactly where RJ said his father was sitting. Forensic evidence supported the confession that would come later, but at the time they didn't yet have the truth. All they had was a calm young man with no clear explanation, and a father who had died in one of the most savage ways imaginable. RJ was brought in for questioning, and while police expected resistance, what they got instead was chilling compliance. With no legal counsel and no attempt to deny what happened, he spoke freely. He described the night in vivid detail, how he hesitated, how he felt afterward, how he stood there over the body and thought about taking his own life, but didn't. He said he felt empty, disconnected, like he had watched someone else commit the murder. It was one of the most disturbing interviews the detectives had ever conducted. Not just for the content, but for how calmly RJ recounted it. There were no tears, no screams, only silence between sentences. A stillness that made it all the more terrifying. By the time he finished his confession, there was no question of guilt, only of why. Why a young man with no known mental illness, no history of severe violence, would kill his father so brutally, so senselessly. That answer never fully came. In the months following the trial, the Gulia family home sat vacant, its windows shuttered, its lawn overgrown. Neighbors avoided walking their dogs too close to the property. The place where it all happened had become a symbol of something they couldn't unsee. A house no longer defined by the lives once lived within it, but by the violent act that tore them apart. Inside the home, remnants of the past remained. A family portrait on the mantle, Thanksgiving decorations still stored in the hallway closet, a dusty guitar in the corner of Theodore's study, the one RJ said his father used to play. Everything was still there, frozen in time, but the people were gone. Ben moved out of town not long after the sentencing. He spoke to reporters once, briefly. He said he had no intention of ever seeing his brother again. "I loved my dad," he said, "and now he's gone. There's nothing more to say." Theodore's wife Annie fell silent in the wake of the trial. She stopped answering calls, stopped returning letters. Some say she blamed herself, that she kept replaying the timeline. What if she had come home earlier? What if she had called that night? But grief doesn't answer to reason. It only lingers. As for RJ, he was transferred quietly to the Lorraine Correctional Institution. No special treatment, no fanfare. Just a number among thousands, locked away with his memories. Prison guards noted that he kept to himself. He didn't talk much. He refused most visitors. He asked for books, philosophy, mostly. And sometimes he asked about music, particularly his father's favorite songs. Psychologists assigned to his case reported that RJ remained emotionally fragile. They described his demeanor as numb, detached. He expressed guilt but struggled with the reality of what he had done. One report noted that RJ often said the same sentence during their sessions: "I wish I could go back just 5 minutes." But time does not reverse. And even as years pass, the ripples of that night continue to echo. The town of Solon learned something from the Galea case, something uncomfortable. That darkness doesn't always live in strangers or break-ins or unsolved mysteries. Sometimes it lives right next door. Sometimes it eats dinner at the same table. Sometimes it carries your last name. Local schools began offering expanded counseling services. Domestic violence prevention programs received more funding. Parents talked more openly with their kids. But under it all remained a quiet unease. Because the truth is, even with a trial, a sentence, and a confession, there are still questions. Why did RJ snap? Was it years of emotional pressure? Mental illness? A moment of madness? Or was it simply that something inside him was always waiting to break? And if that's true, if evil can live in the hearts of the ones we love, how do we ever feel safe again? The story of Theodore Galea didn't end with a gavel, or a confession, or a prison cell. It ended in silence. A silence that, for those who knew him, never truly goes away. Theodore Galea's story isn't just the tale of a murder. It's the collapse of a family, a warning about the invisible fractures that can widen into tragedy when left unattended. It's about silence, about anger that simmers until it becomes something irreversible. And it's about how evil sometimes doesn't wear a stranger's face. It wears a familiar one. What happened inside that home wasn't an accident or an impulsive moment of rage. It was a slow, haunting unraveling of a relationship broken long before blood ever hit the floor. And though justice was served in the eyes of the law, the emotional weight left behind, on a mother who lost both her husband and her son, on a brother who now carries trauma instead of memories, and on a community forever changed, can never truly be balanced on a scale. This case forced people to confront difficult truths, that monsters don't always come in the night. Sometimes they sit at your dinner table, sometimes they share your last name, and that the line between love and destruction, in rare and tragic instances, can blur into something deadly. But perhaps the darkest part of all isn't the murder itself. It's how easy it was to overlook the signs, the arguments, the warnings, the cold stares that never made sense. Because hindsight, as always, arrives too late. In the end, Theodore's death became more than a headline. It became a symbol, a painful reminder to pay attention, to speak up, to intervene before the final moment when intervention is no longer possible. Let this story serve as that reminder, not just about the horror of what happened, but about the importance of asking hard questions, of checking in, and of not waiting until it's too late. If this video made you stop and think, even for a moment, help us bring more true stories like this to light. Like this video, comment your thoughts or experiences below. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more in-depth crime breakdowns, confessions, and investigative analysis. Thank you for watching. Stay aware, stay safe.